Hello and welcome to the 2022 UCI Cycling Esports World Championships, the second edition of this, the newest of the UCI sanctioned world titles. And today we'll see the very best of elite esports riders go toe-to-toe for the world champions jersey. Two super strong fields of men and women will be competing over an equal race distance of just over 50 kilometers on Zwift's punishing New York Knickerbocker course. It is a fantasy world based on the Big Apple 100 years from now, with elevated transparent roadways, snaking past sleek sci-fi buildings, along with the present-day reality of the lumpy roads of Central Park. Now, the beauty of racing on Zwift is that our competitors can race from wherever they are on the planet. So we've got riders taking part remotely from their spare rooms, their garages, mum's kitchen, pain caves, or training bases all around the planet. With the women's race starting in just under 15 minutes' time, the men's race coming shortly after, and both the famous rainbow stripes and prize money up for grabs, the nerves are sure to be tingling for our riders right now. Now, this event truly is unique as it attracts both top-flight World Tour pros and the very best elite-level esports riders. And someone who knows all about training both is Lotto Soudal Sports Director Sportif Sherry Pridham. Good to see you, Sherry. We're also joined by someone who spends their winters commentating on the Zwift Racing League and summers commentating on the Tour de France and the Vuelta a España and other races too. Hannah Walker is with us. Good to see you too, Hannah. Sherry, first question to you. What are the unique attributes, if there are any, of a great esports racer?
I think the key understanding for a great esport racer is to understand the game itself and have a full understanding of how to pace yourself, and exactly that is, you know.
Yeah, you can't just switch from one discipline to this and think you're going to be good at it. You have to really know what you're doing. And how important do you think the tactics and course knowledge to today's race?
I think you'll find that both the riders, the male and the female riders here today, would have had a huge experience in training and racing on the circuit. So they will understand, the sports directors that are looking after them, team managers, so to speak, will have really gone through every inch of the course, and the riders themselves will have known exactly where to go, where to attack, where the best place is to take that flyer.
It's hard to choose, Hannah, isn't it? Because it is a tough old course, the New York Knickerbocker course. What kind of rider do you think is going to do well today?
Yeah, it's incredibly difficult when you look at the makeup of the course, just less than 55 kilometres in length with 944 metres of elevation. So it's a rider who really excels on those climbs, who is able to meet the physical demands of the course and the climbs. That finishing climb, you know, hilltop finish, a rider who is one of the best climbers in esports. And let's not forget, we're going to see the best esports riders in the world competing for the rainbow bands here. It's someone who is able to be patient, I think, someone who is able to really read the race, read the course, who has a good amount of knowledge, as Sherry said, who's done a lot of recons as well. I think that's incredibly important, but someone who, you know, they might be one of the best climbers, but someone who can really stay with the best climbers and then to the finish have a good sprint to the line, because it's going to take a big punch.
It's almost springtime here in the Northern Hemisphere, at least. Do we think this kind of course suits a sort of spring classics rider? Because it's very up and down all day long. Sherry?
Yeah, definitely. The type of rider you're looking at here today is as Hannah mentioned, Ardennes classic type rider, puncher. That ability to be able to climb for 3 to 5 minute efforts and really, you know, put the power down and know when to put the power down.
I think it's going to be animated in both races right from the off. I can't wait to see it. Thanks, Hannah, Sherry, for the time being. Look, before we get into more detail about the course and the qualification process, we've got Matt Stevens in the studio to give us a quick look at how competitive indoor cycling works and also the equipment they're going to be using for today's race. Matt, over to you.
As host platform for the UCI Cycling Esports World Championship, Zwift is an online multiplayer game that enables competitors from all over the world to ride and race against each other. Let's have a closer look. Now, when you pedal your bike connected on a home trainer, this drives your avatar around a virtual course. The harder you pedal, the faster you go, and the resistance you feel will increase when going uphill and decrease when going downhill, just like in real life. And you'll also benefit from the draft effect from other riders when sitting directly behind them, like the experience out there on the open road. Now, the bikes themselves are attached to the smart trainer with the rear wheel removed and secured by the rear axle. Zwift then takes the input from your bike via the smart trainer or power meter that translates it into the avatar's speed out on the virtual course. The resistance on the smart trainer reacts to the terrain undulations in-game, taking into account a rider's power output, weight, and any draft benefits. Other data is also displayed, such as cadence and heart rate. Now, for the UCI Cycling Esports World Championships, the smart trainer used is standardised to ensure a technically level playing field and eliminate any minor variables between trainer types. Riders will be allowed to use their own bikes, of course, but all competitors have been supplied and will use the latest Wahoo Kicker smart trainer. And finally, the riders will really be heating up fast, so all will have their own bespoke cooling system using a big fan or two. And, of course, plenty of fluids.
Going to need those fluids and that big fan. Matt, thank you very much indeed. As we've already said, this event is truly unique as it's made up of professional cyclists and also triathletes, but it's open to elite Zwift community riders as well, if they can meet the very high standards. Here's a man who knows almost everything there is to know about this type of racing, Dave Toll, to talk us through how the 2022 UCI Cycling Esports World Championships promises to be one of the most accessible events to date.
180 athletes from 25 nations will take to the start line of the 2022 UCI Cycling Esports World Championships here in the virtual New York City. But how did they get here to fight it out for the iconic rainbow jersey, you may be thinking? Well, I'm glad you asked. First up, the reigning champions take their places. Ashley Moolman-Pasio from South Africa and Jason Osborne from Germany. That's right, to be the queen or king, you've got to beat the queen or king. Next up, like other UCI cycling disciplines, national federations pick a certain number of riders to represent their countries at the World Championships. Finally, anyone can ride on Zwift. So, unique to this event, there were open qualification races accessible to everyone. In total, 8 continental qualifying races were held, with 50 riders earning a spot here in the Big Apple. So there you have it, a global field for 2 UCI World titles. Ride on!
And here are some of our qualifiers in the women's race all around the world, getting ready to race each other. Cannot wait. But Sherry, before we get to it, just explain a little bit more. Does teamwork come into this at all, or is it pretty much every rider for themselves? No,
most definitely be some teamwork in there, whether that's a nation, Matt, that has one rider representing or whether you've got 10 riders representing your nation. That strategy that they would have worked out either during the preparation, the qualifiers, every bit of training that they'd done for this particular event today, they will have a strategy.
And does that strategy also include keeping an eye out for other riders? Well, they've had their sort of teams looking out, or their teammates saying, hang on, she's been racing really well recently, keep an eye on her, we'll mark her, for example.
There'll be a lot of homework being done. A good team manager, a good sports director will already be on top of that information. And they'll have the communication on Discord as well, which is the communication app that they use to keep each other informed, being that they are in different parts of the world.
Hannah, you're going to be joining Matt to commentate on both races. So you're going to have to keep a close eye on those riders who are marking others. Is it obvious when they're doing that?
You certainly will do. I mean, I think riders will come into this whilst having the information and knowledge from their team managers, their sports directors, with their own knowledge of knowing exactly which riders are going to excel on a course like today and who are going to be the key figures who are going to be prominent in the race. But I think it will be interesting in a World Championship. It's very different to any other race we've seen over the last few months. Of course, it's a world title on offer, but it will be interesting and different to see how the race unfolds, how the tactic unfolds, and how much they do sort of follow each other.
What is also interesting and specific to these two races is the power-ups and how they're doled out on each lap as well. They're going to be absolutely key, aren't they? It's
going to be vital to make sure that you use them at the right place, maximise it to your own benefit. There's 7 opportunities to gain a power-up. We've got the draft boost, we've got the aero boost, and we've got the feather power-up. So really key to make sure that you're using them correctly, making sure that you're using it to your benefit, and then come the finish line, make sure that you are using it at the right time. For the draft boost, it lasts for 30 seconds. For the aero and the feather, 15 seconds. So highly important.
The ones who've really worked out how to do it properly it's gonna really tell. Just very quickly, Sherry, let's not forget that people are spread right around the world. In the US and in Europe, it's going to be relatively straightforward. It's going to be a morning race or an evening one. But what about those people in the Far East and Japan? It's middle of the night for them. Difficult.
Yeah, it is, Matt, and it's all about preparation. So they would have been doing, I guess, recons at that time of the night or early hours of the morning. So they'll have done all that preparation, the nutrition, the warm-up. They would have gone through every single process for such, I mean, after all, it's the Esports World Championship. So no stone left unturned.
No, and setting that alarm very early or late indeed. Thank you both very much indeed. Now, the winners of both the men's and women's events will be awarded the famous rainbow stripes in the shape of the UCI Cycling Esports World Champions jersey, both in the virtual world and in real life as well. And there is a lot of talent out there amongst these 78 riders in today's women's field.
The riders on the women's start line won't make it a walk in Central Park for reigning cycling esports world champion Ashley Moolman-Pasio. Up against her is a stellar cast of esports racers with legitimate claims to the title. The Big Apple's own Kristen Kolchinski is sure to be at home, climbing the New York QOM with that signature low-cadence style. Meanwhile, her Team USA counterpart, Shayna Paulus, can lay claim to first place in the America's Continental Qualifier. Los Allergeest is another frontrunner in a strong Dutch squad, including Zwift Academy winner Maud Aldman. Everesting record holder Eilidh Gardner is another one to watch, along with her Great Britain teammate Zoe Langham, who's been absolutely tearing it up in the Zwift Racing League Premier Division ever since she won the European qualifier. So it's all on the line here in New York as we see who will climb to the top and take that title.
It is almost time to ride on, as Dave likes to say, bags of talent actually on that start line. Are we going to see Ashley Moolman-Pasio and her South African team successfully defend the jersey, or one of our ones to watch take it off her shoulders? Let's hand over straight to our commentary team of Hannah Walker and Matt Stevens now.
Hello and welcome to the women's elite race of the UCI 2022 Cycling Esports World Championships, taking place here in virtual New York City, essentially taking a big bite out of the Big Apple. 2.5 laps of the NYC Knickerbocker course, featuring, as you can see, very undulating terrain. Just look at that sawtooth profile for the rainbow bands will take place. The main feature of the course, of this 54.9 kilometre course, is the QOM forward climb, which is essentially broken into 3 sections with early gradients at 16%, as you can see there. Eases a little bit, then kicks up to a maximum of 17%. And as we get a little bit further up the climb, it really does drag on. You can just see the finishing straight there. 16% near the top, before gradually leveling out as the line approaches. And this is the location where the rainbow jersey will be won. Look at that, absolutely spectacular. Now, we've got power-ups available on the route today. They are specific and the same for all riders. The first sprint arch out on the course offers up the draft boost, which increases draft benefit for 30 seconds. Next up is the aero boost, and that's through the climb. Improved aerodynamics for 15 seconds, as you can see there. And then the final sprint is the feather. That's at the lap arch, which reduces a rider's weight by 10% for 15 seconds. Now this is the map the riders will face today. 54.9 kilometres long, looping around Central Park with 944 metres of elevation, including the Catpaw climb and the forward QOM, to be faced on 3 occasions. At the top, of course, the rainbow bands will be awarded. 23 federations and countries are being represented at these championships, including the USA, Great Britain, Denmark, and of course the nation of defending champion Ashley Moolman-Pasio of South Africa. Let's have a look at some of the key riders. Wearing number 1 is the defending champion Ashley Moolman-Pasio. Kristen Kolchinski on the right-hand side there, riding on home soil. Zoe Langham, a real young sensation, has lit up the esports world this year. Also, Shayna Paulus should be in the mix too. Lois Addergeest, very aggressive rider from the Netherlands. Eilidh Gardner, a superb climber from Great Britain. Sarah Gigante as well, the Australian. Sure, she took the second place in the last edition back in 2020, and Cecilia Hansen as well, who took third at the same event. They are the picture-in-pictures. The riders are going to be underway very, very shortly indeed. This should be absolutely spectacular. Well, here we are. We're out on the course, and it's time to, well, to bring in Hannah Walker. Hannah, great to have you alongside me again. I am very much looking forward to this. Finally, we're here after a brilliant season of esports racing. We are here in the Big Apple at the World Championships. It's a long one. We need to ease ourselves into this. Well, it's going to be wonderful, isn't it?
Thanks very much, Matt. It is wonderful to be here, isn't it? And to see the very, very best, the world's best esports riders racing here in the Big Apple on the Knickerbocker course in New York. It's a huge event. It's those coveted rainbow jersey is on offer for both the men and women riders, and it's so prestigious, and they all come in their top form. They're the best teams, the best riders. We're using and coming and gunning for the win.
Yeah, definitely. It should be a very attritional race. And just for any of you watching this for the very, very first time, as was explained at the top of the show, these are riders representing their national countries, their national federations. We've got in this women's field 86 riders. As you can see, all the national colours, quite easy to pick out. As we're just rolling through, one rider has just drifted off the front there. That's Sarah ten Hartog of Belgium. But on these early stages, it's just about bedding yourself in. And this, I think it's worth pointing out, Hannah, in these early stages that this race, the World Championships, is pretty long for an esports race. Generally, we see 40 minutes, 45 minutes, sometimes 50, 55 minutes, but this is going to be around 1 hour and 15. So offers up quite a different proposition to what we normally see, doesn't it?
It certainly does, and also because it is a scratch race, there's no points on offer at any intermediate point in the race. It's the first to cross the line is the winner. So the way that the race unfolds, the tactics that the riders deploy and the way that they ride is going to be very, very different to what we've seen in recent months in esports. But that being said, they'll all come here with their strategy, their tactic. They will have been putting a lot of focus into riding on and training on this course to meet the demands for the longer style of race. And you know, it's so important to make sure that they've done those recons of the course too, to make sure that they know every inch of where to make a move, where the difficult parts are, the points where they are able to get a little bit of respite, which is incredibly important across 55 kilometres.
It is. It's one of my favourite worlds on Zwift. Chosen this course. It has a little bit of everything. Of course, we are in New York City. We go higher up onto these glass roads a little bit later on the circuit. We'll get to see that in the next 15 or 20 minutes time. But centimetre for centimetre, the roads that they're on now actually replicate exactly the real-life roads, the real-life terrain of New York City, Central Park. So it really is pretty spectacular, as you can see. We just got a glimpse there of Ashley Moorman-Passio for the first time this year, riding in her national colours, of course. We've been used to seeing her in those coveted rainbow bands, which there's going to be a big fight for today. But 52k still to go, long way in, but we get our first opportunity for the riders to take a power up at 7.3k, so it comes quite early, the first time we pass through the sprint arch. And to elaborate again a little bit on the power ups for anybody just new to this, just trying to get a sense of what this is all about. It's a real physiologically demanding sport, but the power ups are crucial, and the gamification side of it really makes this quite specialist, doesn't it?
It certainly does. It really is specialist, and they are vital for the riders to make sure that, first of all, that they use them at the right point, but also maximised to their ability and where they want to be able to use it. So riders have 7 chances of being able to gain a power-up, and it's different to what we've seen in other esports races. It's 100% certainty at every arch of which power-up every rider will get in the peloton, in the bunch here. So when they go through the sprint arch, they will receive, every single rider in the peloton will receive the draft boost. They'll receive that 3 times during the race, so it's 7.3 kilometres in, 29.7 kilometres and 52 kilometres. And the draft boost, that increases your draft that you're experiencing in the bunch by 50%, and that's for 30 seconds. So that just gives you some indication of how much energy you're able to save by using that power-up. The Queen of the Mountain Arch, the riders will receive the aero boost. You'll receive that 2 times during the game, during the race. That's at 9.7 kilometres and 32.1 kilometres. That makes you more aerodynamic, reducing your CDA, which is your coefficient drag, times frontal area by 25% for 15 seconds. And then the third and final power-up the riders will gain is the feather power-up. They'll receive that again 2 times at 22.5 kilometres and 44.6 kilometres. And this is vital, and I think this is going to be a real key element for the riders. It reduces your weight by 10% for 15 seconds. And if you look at how much elevation there is on today's course, well, I think that is potentially the one that the riders will all want to save for the finish, but who knows? Let's see how it all develops and unfolds.
Indeed. Well, we're looking at Sarah Gigante on the screen from Australia there, kicking out 5.1 watts a kilo. Now, we actually spoke to her before the race, and she has a little bit of a chat with us about racing early in the morning, because obviously she's in a different time zone, and what the physiological requirements and demands of that are. And remember, Sarah Gigante was the silver medalist back in 2020. Let's hear what she has to say.
Since the race is starting at 5:15 a.m. here in Australia, we've all been up very early this morning. We got up just after 3 a.m. I've been trying to warm up hard to wake up my body, and yeah, I'm just really excited. Even though it was early, I feel very awake because of all the excitement. I also went to bed very early the last few days, so I feel quite suited to this new time zone.
Fascinating stuff, isn't it? I mean, you guys talked about it on the sofa about, I mean, this is the wonderful thing about esports. We've got all these people riding together in New York City, but we must remind people at home, these riders are at home in their bedrooms, their kitchens, their garages, their respective pain caves in all these different time zones. That's something to celebrate, but it does have its own unique set of demands. And interesting that Sarah there quite clearly, rather than just having one late night, one early morning, has had several days approached making sure she can get it right. And she has to be one of the favourites as well today, doesn't she?
She certainly does, and especially with that finish and knowing Sarah Gigante's attributes as a rider. And also she has, 2 years ago, since the first Esports World Championships, she has all the more experience and knowledge. But that just gives you some indication as to how riders are adapting themselves to the time zone, to making sure that the body is responsive, depending on where they are in the world. And when you look down at the roster of riders from the USA, Great Britain, Belgium, Australia, New Zealand, all across different time zones, so really crucial that every individual rider, depending on where they're riding from, which country and which time zone, that they are maximising them and getting the best out of themselves.
So coming up very, very shortly through the first arch of the day, we're looking at Zoe Langham there. She again has to be one of the favourites. She's essentially come from nowhere this season and has really lit up the Zwift Racing League, the 6-race series, which was essentially the precursor, the lead in to the World Championships. Lots of ride-ons being dropped there. If you do notice, just above the riders, these little thumbs ups, that's where members of the Zwift community can actually offer up essentially ride-ons, like a like on Facebook, for example, to these riders. And there's a reminder as well of the available power-ups today. We've got the draft power-up, increasing your draft effect by 50% for 30 seconds. The aero power-up, there's 2 options or 2 opportunities to get that one. That's the one with a little aero helmet in the center there, making you more aerodynamic for 15 seconds. And then the final one there, the green feather. And there's 2 opportunities to pick up that one. That reduces your weight by 10% for 15 seconds. And as we chatted about in some detail, all the riders will get the opportunity to get the same power-ups. And in normal Zwift racing, in the Zwift Racing League, they're randomly generated. So although the riders at Hannah are going to get the same ones, they're not necessarily at all going to be using them at the same time, although they will be watching out for their rivals for when they use them. So this is something that we've never seen before. As commentators, for us, it's going to be thrilling, exciting, and unpredictable, isn't it? As we look at, one of the race favourites, Kristin Kuczynski there, a winner of a couple of rounds of the ZRL. I mean, again, she has, this is her stage, isn't it?
It certainly is. When you look at the course and you see the preview, I don't think there's a course better suited to to Kristen Kulczynski, and in her virtual backyard as well. She's from New York, racing at World Championships in New York, and it's the second time representing the USA. She raced in the inaugural World Championships where she finished 9th, and I think again another rider who has so much experience and knowledge under her belt in the last sort of 14-15 months. And if you see how she's been racing in the Zwift Racing League, she's had 2 victories there, one back in November, another. So I think it's fantastic to see the development and how the progress of these riders too over the last few months.
Indeed. Well, Kristen Kulczynski has got 9 other teammates, 10 riders from the USA. And again, we did speak to Kristen Kulczynski at length, actually. She speaks about racing against Ashley Moolman-Pasio, the current world champion, and her admiration, and specifically about what it requires, or the effort it requires on the Epic KOM, or the QOM, which we're going up now. So let's have a little listen to what Kristen Kulczynski had to say.
I was looking forward to racing her, I mean, since I heard she was going to be in the Premier League. It's just like, I'm such a big fan of hers, obviously. So to actually have the opportunity to ride, race against her on Zwift, like I would never have that opportunity in real life. I'm just a, Zwift racer. So that was like, man, it was like the coolest thing. Like that's why I started racing 2 years ago in the beginning of the pandemic, because my best friend, my coach, Josh, he was just like, Kristen, everyone is now on Zwift. Like, so finally, like elite women, pro women, I was like, I can race these women. And it just like, it's been an obsession and passion of mine. I always forget, like, wait, I'm a jeweler, I'm a goldsmith, but now it's like, I've got these 2 things that are my life now. But yeah, that last race, oh man, you think about it after, and I did moan for 10 minutes after that race because I was in a lot of pain, but like you think, damn it, like I should have just given it a little bit more and like caught the wheel, because when it flattened out, if I had caught her wheel, there was real potential. I could have drafted and went by her, but I just I think she broke my brain. I think my brain was like, I lost and I'll be happy with second. But now that I've breathed, I've recovered, I've thought about the race, I was like, man, I should have just suffered a little more.
I should have suffered just a little bit more. Well, there's going to be lots of suffering going on today, that is for sure. We're looking at Kristen Kulczynski well on to the climb now. A reminder, this Queen of the Mountains climb is 1.4 kilometers long. We're well on to the slopes. On the second part of the climb now, you can just see the gradient. If you look to the top right-hand side of your screen, that indicates the percentage gradient. And unsurprisingly, Kristen Kulczynski is one of the riders at or near the front, pressing on a little bit. Emma Belforth not too far away as well. If you're looking at the positions on the right of the screen, that's basically the order of riders, the top 10 riders on your screen, and the little figure on the details on the right-hand side, the stats, that's the power to weight ratio. That's the watts per kilogram that these riders are currently kicking out on this climb. And they're moving pretty quickly. No big moves as yet. But Hannah, I'm expecting this race, maybe for the first part, to be a little bit cautious because it's so long. Nobody's going to want to go too deep first time up this climb, because 3 big 3.5-minute efforts up here will ultimately really start to cost a rider. They'll really dig into their reserves. So unsurprisingly, we're seeing the opening few kilometres ridden a little bit conservatively.
Absolutely, and just to give you an indication of how difficult this climb is, it's 1.4 kilometres with an average gradient of 6.1%, but that doesn't tell the full story, because you have sections of the climb of 15, 16, 17%, and incredibly difficult, making sure that you're on top of the gear selection is vital, but in saying that, we still have a relatively large group still here, no real big moves going off the front, but there has been a few riders who've been tailed off, just struggling at the moment with the sheer pace. So it might not look too hard, too difficult, too fast at the moment, but it certainly is. As you see, top right-hand screen, 15%, those numbers into deep red. And this is what the riders will have. They'll be able to have a look at what the finish line looks like with 100 metres to go, and it ever so slightly tails off here towards the finish line.
It does actually flatten that last little bit. It was still at around 12% with about 150 metres to go. Only starts to flatten. It's certainly not totally flat. Just look as they cross the line there, 1%. This is where the road mercifully just starts to ease off a little bit. We're looking a picture-in-picture there of Cecilia Hansson of Sweden, third, remember, in the 2020 UCI Cycling Esports World Championships. She's one of the most experienced and respected riders out there. She could be very, very disruptive today, but just making sure she's at the head of affairs. And as we just hit the descent and look at Ashley Moolman-Pasio, nice to be mid-pack there as the riders whiz by. Can you talk to us a little bit and explain again to those who are maybe looking at this for the first time, Hannah, the draft benefit? It is, just to explain that, so the riders in the peloton here will be getting a draft benefit from the riders in front of them and around them, in fact, won't they?
They certainly will, and so it's vital that you are maximising and using the riders around you to save energy, to use the draft of the other riders. It's just like in real life racing, or when you're riding out on the road. If you're up towards the front, you're gaining no benefit from the draft, and actually the optimum place to be riding in the peloton is actually towards the back, but it takes a lot of finesse, it takes a lot of practice to be able to get it right, to make sure that you're able to react to any moves that are going up towards the front of the bunch. But it is vital to make sure that you use the draft effect in game as much as you possibly can. And you can just see one of the Swedish riders there making the use of the super tuck on the descent, another way that riders can save energy here.
Yeah, the super tuck is something the riders will do on the descents. The gradient needs to be at a certain point, and they need to pick up, I think it's 56 kilometres an hour they need to get to, and then it offers up a little bit of a micro rest. And on a course like this that's very undulating, there are not that many opportunities apart from dropping off the top of this climb. We are looking at Ashley Moolman-Pasio. It looks like she's riding within a discotheque there, just giving her that extra little bit of morale. Ashley Moolman-Pasio, of course, one of the most gifted road riders out there, as well as being a real expert at esports. Won the last race. That was the race that we heard Christian Kulczynski talking about a few moments ago. Now, if you look just below the top 10 riders rotating, we can see the power-ups held powered by NTT, and that's the power-ups that are still to be deployed or that haven't been used within the bunch. So there's still 42 aero power-ups, and there's 7 draft power-ups still to be used as well, which is a pretty interesting stat. Unsurprisingly, that is quite interesting. I'm wondering why some people haven't deployed their draft power-ups, because again, just to explain that, if somebody doesn't use a power-up and they go through another arch, they keep the previous one, don't they? I'm right in saying that?
Yes, you certainly are right, Matt, in saying that if they go through an arch and they haven't used their draft boost power-up, it doesn't mean that they can store 2, 3, they can't save up all the power-ups in their bank and then use them all at once, let's say towards the finish line. It just means that the power-up that is in their locker, let's say, will be kept, and they won't even be able to take the next power-up that's available. So they've got the draft boost power-up at the sprint arch. When they go through the Queen of the Mountain arch, as we just previously have, if they haven't used the draft boost, they're not going to get that aero boost. So as you say, early on in the race, it's quite intriguing that some riders haven't used their power-ups, because especially early on, you want to make sure that you're saving as much energy as you possibly can. The power-ups are there also for your benefit. I think the more tactical play of power-ups and perhaps keeping them for later on, sort of the final, towards the finish line, would come later on in the race, not so early.
Indeed, it's looking at the... Don't worry, the rest of the field haven't turned invisible. We've just done that for our benefit, so we can highlight the Great Britain team. Eilidh Gardner, Mary Wilkinson, Hayley Simmons, former British TT champion, of course, Zoe Langham, Charlotte Kovklos, Harriet Gilson, Natalie Stevenson, Alice Lethbridge and Helen McKay. That's a very, very strong Great Britain team indeed. And then we're looking at Mary Wilkinson, just sat mid-pack or just towards the back. She knows exactly where to ride. She's a former Zwift Academy finalist. She runs a farm up north in Great Britain. She's a very popular character, and again, a very dangerous character indeed in terms of a finish like this, although she can sprint as well, but she will certainly like this hilltop finish. In fact, we did have a conversation with Mary Wilkinson. There she is, headband on. Mary actually spoke about her route to representing British cycling for the first time at the Esports World Championships. She's previously been an international runner and a hill climb specialist as well. So let's hear what Mary Wilkinson had to say.
So I've come from an international running background, and that was quite cruelly taken away from me by injury. So to have this kind of almost a second chance to represent my country is something that I never thought I'd get, and it's a huge privilege, and something that I'm so excited to be able to do again. It's always such a privilege to put on the red, white and blue of your country, and it gives you that extra boost, and yeah, I'm just so happy to have been given the opportunity again.
I must admit, Hannah, that when we see these lovely interviews, get a real insight. You can see how much it means to all of these riders to represent their respective cycling federations or countries, and especially Mary Wilkinson. I'll be honest with you, I thought she'd represented Great Britain before, but she is so proud to wear that kit, and we're used to seeing her in a Canyon Esports kit, the team that she races for in the Zwift Racing League, but to see these riders in the different kit, I love it. I really do, and it's great to see them in real life, in the actual jerseys, as well as in game as well. I really love that. It's such a, and just talking about the tactics in a World Championships, very much like in real life, riding on the road. The tactics are going to be very different because there's only one time a year, apart from an Olympic Games every 4 years, where riders actually get to do this, isn't it? The World Championships is a unique proposition in the way a team works, because normally these riders will be on different teams, or just maybe have one or two teammates with them. So it poses tactically a really different proposition, doesn't it?
It certainly does. This is a very proud, prestigious moment for these riders to pull on their national jersey. But as you say, the teams that we normally see, Mary Wilkinson is riding alongside German riders, French riders from all different nations within her Canyon Esports team. So very different then to come together to represent Great Britain and be surrounded by an all-British team who perhaps you haven't ridden with before. Because it's virtual, they're all riding from their homes, their pain caves. Perhaps they've never met each other in real life, but just connected on the Discord. That is a good point. We just saw Jackie Godby then just floating off the front. I'm not too sure whether that was a definitive attack. She certainly didn't continue with it. It is very hard to maintain the same rhythm, the same pace as the peloton when you're out in front. But that was the first little flying, maybe a bit of a leg test. And the thing about this particular course, there's not that much flat at all. It's constantly undulating, so you've got to kind of keep on the power as best you can. But if you carry a lot of pace into one of these dips, you can actually eventually slingshot your way through the peloton and out the other side. And clearly, Godby wanted to be in a good position, but that wasn't a defined attack, was it? Because as soon as she was out in front with a 1.5-second lead, she knocked off the power and drifted back into the peloton. With only 15 kilometres done, it's a bit too early to do anything bold like that, isn't it? It certainly is. And she was just using something that we call free speed within cycling. Using the free speed that she's gained. Again, another way of saving energy, as you just mentioned, Matt. This course, it is difficult, it is undulating. There are very few parts of the course where you can recover, where you can get a little bit of respite. And Jackie Godby, she is one of the most experienced riders in esports. She's had numerous victories in esports before, and she certainly knows how to ride, how to finesse, she just knows the nuances of the game. She certainly does. Just looking at the size of this peloton, it's already been reduced. Several riders, or 20 or 30 riders, have already dropped out of the back as we look at Fie Osterby of Denmark. A couple of power-ups being used just there. That's the aero power-up. Reduces your drag coefficient by 25%, basically, to the layperson. Makes you far more aerodynamically efficient. That's the kind of power-up you like when you're moving at high speed. The higher the speed, the more benefit from actually reducing your drag coefficient. There's not quite the same benefit when you're moving slowly. And when we still haven't been through the lap arch to get the featherweight power-up, but there's another opportunity to get another power-up before we get to the climb. I really do like the way this course has been designed. It's not quite as simple. I thought initially the last arch you'll get through is a featherweight power-up, but that's not the case, is it? So people are really going to have to think if they want to save the featherweight power-up or use the draft power-up on the climb. I would be
Well, I need a lot more help in a field like this, to be perfectly honest with you. Let's not go into that. But I would choose the featherweight power-up. I think I might hold on to it. What do you think? How do you think Rod's are going to play it, especially into the last lap?
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, as we saw the first time up the climb, it does level off ever so slightly with around 100 metres to go, and there is a few other sections as well, around a kilometre to go until we reach the finish line, where it does ever so slightly, you're around 4% gradient. However, I think when you have those really steep gradients, I think I would echo the same, save the power up, the feather power up, because it reduces your weight by 10% for those 15 seconds. And if you're on one of those really incredibly steep sections of 16, 17%, it's going to make all the world of difference.
It certainly is. Well, no definitive attacks just yet. We look at Fi Osterby again. The RPM, that's revolutions a minute. That's the pedal revs per minute. BPM, that's beats per minute. All of these stats they have to show. As I talked about at the top of the program, actually, all of the riders are on the same home trainer, the same smart trainer. So there's no difference at all. So there's a standardization for the first time in the World Championships. So everybody's going to feel that same resistance. And that's a new development and a very, very important one indeed. Maud Alderman just moves through to the front, the recent winner of the Zwift Academy. She went through various training programs on Zwift, ended up in the finals over in Mallorca, and has been presented with a professional contract, the Zwift Academy. If you've not heard of that one, do check it out. It is a very, very interesting project indeed. I think it's now in its 5th year, but Maud Alderman now rides for the Canyon SRAM team. Yeah, has ridden very well this year. Very young indeed, 19 years of age, Maud. As we look at Emma Belforth. Emma Belforth, one of a very, very strong Swedish team indeed. 4 riders from Sweden: Cecilia Hansen, Emma Belforth, Anna Svardström and Marlene Bjarhed. That is a small team, but a very, very strong one. One of the most experienced teams in terms of races done and how long they've been on the scene, I think.
Oh, it's a mightily strong team. With the Swedish team, as you just said, they have so much experience in esports. Cecilia Hansen, 3rd at the last Esports World Championships. Emma Belforth, who we're seeing picture in picture here in her pain cave, she was 8th in 2020. So just gives you some indication of the strength and depth within the Swedish team. And Anna Svardström and Marlene Bjarhed, some real mainstays who we're seeing week in, week out in the results in esports.
And no surprise that all 4 are still in that main group. We saw several riders detached on the first ascent of the climb. Still 2 more climbs to come. Now the next arch that they pass through, if you just look at the bottom right of your screen, you've got elapsed time, 28 minutes done. So just coming up, not quite halfway just yet. 19 kilometres under the wheels. Remember the total distance of today's race, 54.9 kilometres, with a whopping elevation gain of 944 metres. And I think that equates to about 3,000 feet, if I'm not mistaken. So very, very hilly day indeed, as we look at one of the German riders, Ricarda Björnfeind. Now the German team have 3 riders: Maria Brunet, Björnfeind on the screen there, and Hannah Ludwig. Hannah Ludwig, a very, very talented time trialist. Again, one of the Canyon SRAM riders out on the road, an exceptionally gifted young rider, good on the track as well. So the German team, unsurprisingly, have a very, very strong squad. But still, you can just sense there's a little bit of what the French would say, an entente cordiale in the bunch. People just waiting. This is going to simmer and bring to the boil, I think, towards the back end, which is no surprise given the distance here. This is you certainly don't want to take too early a bite out of the Big Apple on this course, do you?
You absolutely don't, Matt, because you've got to be patient, as we said. Making sure that you are patient, plays dividends in the end, that you're not wasting energy. You want to make sure that you're saving as much as possible. You can't throw away those efforts too early. They have to be, if you do make an effort, it has to count and has to have a reason behind the reason why you're making that attack. And also riders playing towards their strategy, their team strategy for the nation. But it does, patience is a virtue.
Indeed. Well, I am absolutely intrigued to see next time through, the first time through the lap arch. They will then have 2 full laps to go. That comes at 22 Ks. So in around about 2.3 kilometres time, We will pass through that arch, and anybody who hasn't actually spent their power-ups will get a feather power-up. But lots of riders still keeping hold. Well, there's a couple of riders who have still kept hold of their draft power-up, and the 22 riders still have their aero power-up. And I'll be wanting to use that quite soon. Now, again, we talked about it. We didn't go into too much detail, but the power-ups can be used offensively and defensively as well. When I say defensively, you can use them passively, so just to give yourself a little bit of a, when there's no attack, you can just sit in the bunch, increase your draft, and therefore the requirement to move at the same speed as everybody else is less. So rather than hold on to it, I would be inclined to use it just to give myself a little bit of a rest.
And especially on a section of road like this, they're currently travelling at around 53, 54 kilometres per hour. If you use that draft power up, the benefits are going to be fantastic for you. They certainly are, because you know, it's just giving yourself that little bit of respite. It doesn't mean that you're going to make an attack or make a breakaway. It's just helping yourself. And you know, riders, if they even use their power up on the approach to the next arch, whilst it's still being deployed, they will get another one into their pocket. As here we see one of the chasing groups, Hannah Ludwig, the German rider in this group, along with Gigante and Ella Harris.
Well, this is a big surprise. Sarah Gigante and Ella Harris. Sarah Gigante, a silver medalist, has been detached. Well, that is a big surprise. They're at 1 minute and 3 seconds. And Ella Harris there, the New Zealander, another road professional, races a lot on Zwift for Canyon SRAM, representing New Zealand, a former Zwift Academy winner as well. Also Hayley Simmons, the former British time trial champion, said she couldn't believe that she'll be racing a World Championships in her living room in New York. Think about that for a few moments. It's almost like having an existential moment or two, isn't it? But big surprise to see the silver medalists from 2020 in this lead group. We knew they moved up that climb quickly, but I didn't expect such classy riders to be detached so early on in the race. And with a gap of 1 minute and 5 seconds in Zwift, that is going to be almost irretrievable.
It will. This is incredibly difficult for this group to try and make any inroads to that leading group now. I think the only way it's going to happen is if the front group really kick the speed off, this chasing group work well together, they all share that workload. It's going to be the only way that they start to make the inroads and they can have and get themselves back in with a chance of these rainbow jerseys. But as you say, huge surprise to see the likes of Sarah Gigante, Hayley Simmons, Ella Harris in this chasing group, but it just shows how difficult and how unpredictable this Esports World Championship has been so far.
And also it's worth saying that the amount of power that the lead riders were putting out on the climb on the steep sections, they hit it pretty hard. There was no real attacks. There's a few riders just drifting off the front. You could see the shape of the virtual peloton just shift a little bit and start to string out. But once you do lose the wheel and you lose the draft benefit as well, that's very important to talk about as well. If you do drop off the back, fall out of distance of the benefit of the draft in front, it is very hard, like it is on the road in real life, to get back in contact, back to the front of the race here. There's a big group of riders, still a long distance to go, still 32.2 kilometers to go. You can just see the rainbow bands top left. That is what this is all about, the iconic rainbow bands of World Champion. Back in 2020, as you know, it was number 1, Ashley Moorman-Pasio, who wore that. Now, she was awarded the bands for her avatar to ride in-game, and then thankfully as well, she was awarded a real-life rainbow jersey, which she can wear on the home trainer in Girona, where she lives. Although she hails from South Africa, home for her at the moment and for the last few years has been in Girona, so she'll be racing out of Spain, and she's got a great setup and a lot of support. And talking of support and communications, I know you touched on it on the sofa just a little bit, but how will these riders ultimately be communicating with each other, especially given the fact they're not in their traditional teams, they're in national formations now?
Yeah, it's still very much like World Tour Pro Racing, where you have your race radio, you have your team manager, your sports director, who is talking into your ear, giving you tactics, giving you advice, giving you updates on the road, and it's going to be very similar here. So the teams, the riders, they use platforms such as Discord or perhaps a WhatsApp group call, where they'll be communicating with their riders, giving them that information. but not only for the sports director or the team manager, but also for the riders to talk amongst themselves, also give feedback. How are they feeling currently at that point in the race? Perhaps they have put together a plan that they'll be riding all for one rider, perhaps sort of when it gets into the race that they're not feeling so good. I think having that honest, truthful opinion of yourself, of how you are feeling, is incredibly important. So yeah, all the teams will be communicating like that. Every nation will have a virtual car in the race as well, where they'll have one or two sports directors, so they can see inside of what's going on and where different riders are too.
Yeah, it is fascinating. I mean, looking at Brie Vine at the moment, just sat in the middle of this group, 2.3 watts a kilo. That's more than sustainable. RPM 94, and the beats per minute is a key one as well. Actually dropped to well under 100 watts as the road descends. Obviously less efforts required to move the bike on a downhill, but that heart rate, I'd say that's probably in about zone 2 or 3. But when we hit the climb, it'll be moving up into zone 4 or 5, whatever zones people use these days. I think I'm using zones that date back to 1992. So let's not, don't get confused about zones. But very shortly, they will be going through the arch, the lap arch, where they will be awarded a feather. And just to finish off my little, what's ended up as a soliloquy now about Brie Vine, I think that she's the only rider in the race whose husband is riding in the men's later on.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's brilliant that they can support each other. They've always been very supportive of each other's racing, both in esports and IRL in sort of World Tour Pro racing. But talking of that adaptability, Matt, and how riders have prepared for this World Championship, both Brie and Jay live in Andorra, which is at altitude. They've actually gone to sort of sea level down in Girona, rented an Airbnb so they didn't have to race at altitude, and just gives you some indication of how these riders have adapted their riding in their pain caves too.
Well, it just shows how important it is and how highly sought after the rainbow bands are. It really is going to be a tussle as we look for the first time at Mild Oderman, the young rider from the Netherlands, the recipient of a brand new professional contract after winning the Zwift Academy at the back end of last year. One of several riders who's just about to maybe get into an aero tuck. No, she's continuing to ride there as her power drops. And this course, as you can see, constantly undulating. If you looked at a GPX file, a real-life GPX file of this route in Central Park, it matches it exactly centimetre per centimetre, until we head up onto that glass road and into the almost Akira or Blade Runner-esque future skyline. It is one of my favourite worlds on Zwift, and I think a superb course. Offers up a little bit of everything. As we look at Catherine Curry, again, one of the most experienced riders out there. Catherine Curry, former American road race champion, and no less. Very, very experienced indeed, and has won her fair share of races in the Zwift Racing League as well. And she would be a danger today on a course like this.
She would, and I think through her experience both in esports and in World Tour Pro racing, she's a World Cup winner as well back in the mid-2000s down in Australia. And as you just mentioned, she was a USA road race national champion. So Catherine Curry, she has she's very versatile type of rider. She's a great climber, she has a great sprint on her, but also her patience and her timing is impeccable. We've seen her racing in the Zwift Racing League, the way that she times her sprints towards the finish line, and you can just see that focus on her face there.
It certainly was. It's all about focus. This is the group. We're just going back to the second group on the road. The gap last time we saw this group was 1 minute and 5 seconds. It's drifted out a little bit more. It certainly hasn't crumbled that much, but it's gone out a bit more. 1 minute and 12 seconds to the group with some real big hitters in it. Sarah Gigante, as you can see, silver medalist from Australia in 2020. Hayley Simmons were also picking out from this group. But at 1 minute and 14 seconds, as you can see, empty virtual tarmac stretching out. Heading south at the moment, if my geography is right, on this particular, this beautiful course in New York City. But I do think it's going to be nigh impossible for these riders to get back in contact. A couple of the Canadians there, that's Evelyn Gagon and Esther Beauville as well from Canada in this group. Also there, Maika van der Plas of the Netherlands. Little power up is just being used on this rise just to alleviate some of the pain. And the thing is, these riders from different nations and different teams won't be talking to each other at all, yet they'll still be able to ride together, and that only comes with experience, isn't it? That's the quite remarkable thing. We've got this virtual peloton. They're riding thousands and thousands of kilometres apart, yet in-game you can feel the benefit of sitting on the rider's wheel and then moving in front, and they're so used to this. So they are a real collective, aren't they?
They are. They're going to have to form an allegiance at this point in the race, because it's sort of now or never if they want to try and get themselves back into contention. They're going to have to share that workload. They're going to have to all work together, and as you say, they can't communicate, but everyone's going to have to take that initiative to ride on the front to try and bring back the time gap and bring that down. As you say, it just continues to grow. 1 minute and 24 is that gap now. So it's not looking too likely for this group behind, but you never know. Anything could happen.
Indeed, we're just on the halfway point. There you go, 27.6 kilometres to go before we know who will be crowned world champion. We're just looking at the American team, and the picture-in-picture shows us that it's Shayna Paulus. Shayna Paulus, another popular, very versatile, talented rider out of the USA. We spoke to her again earlier in the week, and she spoke in particular about the makeup of the Team USA squad and the fact they've got real versatility within the squad. Punchy riders such as yourself and pure climbers like Kristen Kulczynski and Catherine Curry. Here's Shayna Paulus.
Yeah, so I'd say the Team USA women's team has a very broad range of riders. Riders like myself who tend to be more sprinter type riders and, you know, punchy hill climbers. And we have a couple other girls who are like myself, you know, great sprinters, you know, super fast on the downhills, good punchy hill riders. And then of course we have a few others on the team who are just amazing, amazing climbers, such as Kristen Kulczynski, also a Team 2024 former teammate of mine the last couple of years, and Catherine Curry as well, who's another amazing climber. So those two for sure are, you know, the climbers on the squad. The rest of the women on the team are amazingly strong as well. So I think we have a really well-rounded group of women going into this race, and it's gonna be really fun to see how everyone does and how we all work together.
Great to hear the thoughts of Shayna Paulus. Such a good rider. She has got a real sprinter now, has Shayna Paulus. One of the 10 riders. It's worth listing the whole team of the American. Jackie Godby, Megan Isla, Rebecca Larson, the aforementioned Shayna Paulus, Courtney Nelson, Kristen Kulczynski, who we've already heard from, Stephanie Sidlick, Liz Van Hooling, Catherine Curry, who we saw a few moments ago, and Ariel Martin Verhaeren. So 10 very strong riders, and another strong rider from Switzerland this time, Melanie Maurer. She's a really, really fierce campaigner.
Absolutely. Melanie Maurer, one of the really strong Swiss riders. She's a sole representation for Switzerland, but another rider who really excels in esports, who is part of one of the strongest, most dominant teams in esports, Hino Racing Team. But Melanie Maurer, you know, she doesn't have that team around her. She's at a slight disadvantage. However, the upper hand is she only has to think of herself. She only has to look after herself. She only has to think of her own tactic, her own strategy, and really, as you can just see there, just shaking off the legs, looking very relaxed and comfortable in her pain cave there. And at the moment, you can just see the watts per kilogram, 2.4. So it's not overly difficult at the moment. Quite comfortable. The front group travelling around 46, 47 kilometres per hour.
Indeed. Now Mara has that. It's a double-edged sword, isn't it? Being on your own, you don't have to chase anything. You just need to watch other riders. Of course, you haven't got the support of a team. But it's things, put it this way, are slightly simplified. As we look at Sonia Cecile of Poland. Two riders, she's the only Polish rider in the front group. Her colleague Agata Fliz, should I say, is the other rider, but there's a little bit of a move here just drifting off the front. Somebody's injected a little bit of pace. That's Emma Belforth. We're still looking at Sonia Cecile. So this is coming through the sprint arch again. There'll be some more, there'll be another power up on offer So 25 kilometres still to go. It almost looked like they're actually going for the sprint there. In the normal Zwift Racing League, there would be points on offer, but that wasn't the case this time. I can assure you, no points on offer. Natalie Stevenson rolling through the front. Mary Wilkinson still there. There's 3 or 4 riders from Great Britain in this move as well. The Americans also well represented. Ashley Moorman-Passio just drifts to the front, always making sure that she is at or near the head of affairs, not taking any chances at all. And she is one of the pure road riders that has taken to this sport like a duck to water. I mean, she is the world champion. She has won a couple of rounds of the Zwift Racing League, and she really enjoys it. And the thing that interests me, which is fascinating as we move on to the lower slopes of the climb for the second time, is the fact that she has openly stated that racing on Zwift regularly and training on Zwift has improved her on the road, which is very interesting, isn't it?
It is. And Ashley Moorman-Passio found her love for esports and for the platform during the COVID lockdown. She had very, very strict measures over in Spain, in Girona, where she wasn't able to ride outdoors to continue her profession and to train outdoors, and so took to the platform to do all of her training. And as you say, it improved her ability, her physical abilities in real life racing for the World Tour races. And she's a rider who really excels in, if you're watching esports for the first time, but you follow the World Tour Pro racing, she's a rider who excels in the likes of the Ardennes Classics, any sort of ascending race with a lot of climbing and a lot of elevation. And she is one of the top World Tour pros in the world, and she's becoming and has become one of the best esports riders in the world. And really, she's now created her own esports team as well, the Rocker Corba Collective, where she's got a fantastic community. But again, just showing how important, how prestigious esports is to these riders, Matt.
No, definitely, and bringing a lot more women into the sport as well, as you alluded to. But I tell you what, Ashley Moorman-Passio has decided to just do her own thing on the lower slopes of this climb. There, top right of your screen, that's the gradient. 13% drops off, is only briefly steep. There's a little bit of respite here, then the road gradually kicks up again. But Ashley Moorman-Passio quite clearly is wanting to put the hurt on the other riders. Just dig, make these riders fight, dig into their reserves, blunt the speed from these other riders here. Moorman-Passio, 5.2 watts a kilo, and she's opening up a little bit of a lead. You can just see the stress on her face there. She knows exactly what she's doing. She's thinning this group out in the process, but look who's matching her. Pedal rev for pedal rev, and using a featherweight power up on the climb at the steepest point. That is consummate use of the power up just at the right moment. Christian Kulczynski kicking out 7.5 watts per kilo. Moving clear now. Cecilia Hansen moving up, so a lot of the heavy hitters now moving to the front. And look at what's happening to the peloton, starting to fragment under the impetus of these favourites.
Well, the damage really being done up towards the front here by Christian Kulczynski and Ashley Moorman-Passio, and just being tailed off there. The gap starting to open at the back of the group. Katie Banerjee, the Australian rider who comes from Sydney, she's a rider who really excels on these longer climbs, and to see her in difficulty at this point in the race, that just shows the sheer pace and power being put down at the front of the race here, Matt.
And to tell you what it does show as well, that riders aren't using the draft power up. They're basically saving the featherweight power ups to the climb. That's what I thought would happen. Other riders might do something slightly differently, but for me, it's all about the featherweight power up. There we go, still half a kilometre to the top of this horrible climb, and still some very, very steep gradients as we pass some floating taxis on the right-hand side. Some futuristic versions of the yellow cab in New York, but we've got an elite group of riders starting to move clear. It looks as if here, this is cruel, this particular section. It looks as if we're going through the finish, but we're not. The road kicks up again, and then the finish line comes into view. Eilidh Gardner hits the front for the first time as Moorman-Passio continues to plough her own furrow here. 5 watts a kilo, keeping a brutally relentless high pace here. Still several riders here, just the GB riders moving to the front and easing off, and it looks like it's Louise Huback now. Cecilia Hansen now moving to the front. Belforth there too. This is where the road kicks up again, and next time through they will get the bell.
It's nastily steep, isn't it? And just before you get to that point, you have that false flat of the gradient 4, 4%, 5%, and then you have that nasty kick up, and then it levels off ever so slightly. Still 2-3% though coming towards the finish, but the riders now will gain another power up here. This is the aero boost they will gain if they haven't already used either their feather or draft from previous archers. But at the moment, Belforth's continuing to push on at the front, and Kulczynski and Godby come towards the fore.
Well, the Swedes are looking good. Marlene Bjarhed isn't too far away. Hansen and Belforth are there for Sweden. You can just see Belforth looking across there. 1.6 watts a kilo. Aero power up being deployed by Zoe Langham on the front. Is this a little move to try and go clear? This is where you can get it wrong. I tell you who's making no mistake at all. Ashley Moolman-Passio straight onto the wheel of Zoe Langham. Adopts that super tuck. You're looking through, down and through this beautiful, futuristic glass road to the road below. It does make me feel a little bit queasy, but I do like it. And this is an elite group of riders that are now moving clear. We've still got around 24 riders in this front group, and then the next rider is Merle Bury of Germany, who's off the back. So 24 riders now in this front group. That was a big selection that was made. Didn't fragment quite as much as I thought it did, but Ashley Moolman-Passio clearly wants to make this race as hard and as attritional as possible.
She certainly does, and there's a few riders there who couldn't even get themselves into the super tuck to gain just a little bit of respite just to try and recover. And I'm not sure if perhaps that panic is starting to set in for some of the riders. They're starting to see a rider and a move go off the front, the gaps start to open, and they just want to continue pedaling, and in doing so not making the best use of the descent to get themselves into that super tuck. Zoe Langham being one of them. She's a rider we know, Matt, who is in incredible form, but just looking down some of the other riders who have just been tailed off on that Queen of the Mountain, that climb up towards the finish line. Maud Ouderman, Katie Banerjee, Shayna Powless, who we mentioned before, Natalie Stevenson, the British rider Charlotte Colclough too has been tailed off. So that just gives you an indication of the strength and depth who are unable to go with that move that originally was started by Ashley Moolman-Passio, the defending champion of the rainbow jersey.
It was almost as if it was, well, Ashley Moolman-Passio basically rode from the bottom to halfway point, and then it was Kryska Kulczynski, a similar rider. They are, well, when you look at the last race of the Zwift Racing League, that battle that Kryska Kulczynski was describing in her interview, that was literally woman against woman, wasn't it? The race was absolutely split to pieces, and they're two of the riders that want to try and thin this field out, whittle it down, to use a commentator's cliche, where they've done a very good job of whittling this group down to only 24 riders. And as you correctly said, Hannah, some classy bike riders are now out of the back, but as you can see, there's at least 4 riders from the USA in this lead group. 4 riders as well from Great Britain. We have a Belgian there, 3 riders from Sweden too. Melanie Maurer is the sole representative of Switzerland in the field, and she has made sure she's in this front group as well. Molly Keller is there for Canada too. Caroline Boe of Denmark also in the mix. Eleanor Wiseman of Belgium also there. Jackie Godby, Bree Vine is also in the mix as well. So great riding by Bree Vine and Justine Barrow, the 2 represented for Australia in that front group as well.
Yeah, Justine Barrow, the silver medalist in the Australian Road Race Championships earlier in January, and you know, a rider who again has fantastic experience in esports, also in real life racing too. She was the Australian Masters gold medalist from 2017 to 2019. So Justine Barrow is not a rider to discount on a course like this. She knows how to deal with the difficult undulations of a course like we have here in New York on the Knickerbocker.
Very, very into this. We're looking at the chase group now. This has been led by Maud Alderman. Now they are starting to bring it back. It went out to 12 seconds. Now, if they, given the fact we've still got a fair distance to go, 19 kilometres, if this group's a small, decent group, if they do work, they can get back in contact, especially if there's a little bit of easing behind. They've shut the gap down to 8 seconds now, so it is looking good for this group. They just cannot afford to set up. They do need to work with each other. Although none of these riders, maybe apart from the 2 riders from the Netherlands, won't be talking to each other, they'll be using each other, making sure they don't surge through. taking a turn on the front, and there's a group just in front, 6 seconds now. So this is a really spirited fight by this chase group.
One thing that this group does have with the 8 riders, because it is relatively small, they're all willing at the moment to work together. Sometimes when the group is too large, you see a group of 15, 20 riders, everyone thinks, well, I'll let another rider do the work, I'll let another rider do the chasing, and I can just sit back and save as much energy as possible. But those 8 riders know that this is their last opportunity, their last chance to get themselves back into contention, and especially on this this section of road where they can see the group in front, and the catch is going to be made, Matt.
Yep, the catch is going to be made. Great shot. They have just got back into the draft of that group, and they will be, well, if they could, they'd be doing high fives around. But Kristen Kulczynski has taken this moment. Maybe that felt that there was a little bit of easing and has sensed a textbook opportunity to try and go clear. And it's Anna Svardstrom who's trying to punt herself across the gap. But this is the first definitive big attack by one of the pre-race favourites, Kristen Kulczynski of the USA from New York. 6.4 watts a kilo. She does this so often. She might not necessarily want to leave it to the final climb. She's also aggressive on other parts of the circuit, but maybe sensed there was too much of an easement there, Hannah, and has decided to go clear, and has Emma Belforth with her for company.
Well, I think you're right that there has been an ease up in that front group with the sheer ease that the chasing group got back on, and how quickly they closed that 8-second gap. Kristen Kulczynski, she excels when the pace is on and no other rider is able to get that recovery. She wants to make sure that the pace is hard, make sure it's high, and 4 select riders just go and clear. They have a small gap here. Zoe Langham, Emma Belforth, Kristen Kulczynski, and the defending champion Ashley Moolman-Pasio. But interestingly, it's the rider from the USA, Jackie Godby, who closes the gap.
That was interesting. That's a very, very dangerous quartet of riders, wasn't it? You wouldn't want to let them get too far ahead, especially on a bit of road where there was a real tactical play there. There was a bit of a surprise attack. It drew the sting from 2 of the pre-race favourites. Zoe Langham clearly making sure that she was being very, very attentive indeed. Aero power-up being used there by the Australian. That's Justin Barrow, drifting back into the bunch there. Don't think that's for an attack, just to make it a little bit easier. So this group, this washing machine effect, as riders get back on the descent, they move straight through the centre of the group, and it has swelled again to over, I think we've got around 30 riders back in this front group as we hit another one of these little drags. And Catherine Curry, should I say, another attack from one of the pre-race favourites. Curry now goes clear, 10 watts a kilo, and she's absolutely flying.
Wow, well, that is a move which means business here. Catherine Curry, she's been patient, she's been sitting back, but this is a move that has to count. She's done this with great force, and she reached 11 watts per kilogram. And at the moment, there's no real reaction from the group behind. You can just see by the watts per kilogram on the right-hand side of your screen, all those numbers. When you take a look at Catherine Curry, above 4 watts per kilogram. The rest of the riders within that group are averaging around 1.5 to 2 watts per kilogram. So no movement at the moment. But it looks like Adele Normand, the rider from Canada, starting to move up at the moment.
Oh, this is a great move by Catherine Curry. There's the power-up sailed. 2 of the Van Draft power-ups, 9 aeros and 31 featherweight power-ups being used. But Curry has got a good gap here, 4.5 seconds. It's Adele Normand who's on the front there for Canada, trying to do something about bringing her back. But with a reduced group there, and not too many teams with multiple riders, yeah, it's going to be left to the other teams to try and get organised, and this is where things could get a little bit tactical. Although Svardstrom has gone through to the front as well to try and bring this rider back, because you don't want to let Catherine Curry get 10-15 seconds, because she could just time trial away from this group. So vastly experienced and remarkably strong, but they haven't given her too much leeway here. 2 seconds and counting. I do think she's going to be brought back, but that, to me, that says the Americans are trying to do something a little bit different here. Rather than wait to the climb, they've taken it in turns. We've had 2 attacks from America, Kristen Kulczynski and Catherine Curry, who still hasn't been caught on this nasty drag.
I was just going to say, it was looking like the group were on her, that she was going to be caught, and Catherine Curry, she's continued her effort. You could see her out the saddle with very low cadence, pushing a high amount of power, and the chasing group have just eased off ever so slightly, and in doing so has allowed Catherine Curry to regain time. That time gap has gone back out, Matt, 5.5 seconds now, and it is the two riders from Australia who are up towards the front. Monique Keller from Canada has moved towards the front, but the gap continuing to grow at the moment as Catherine Curry is on this slight descent, minus 5% at the moment, so she can get a little bit of respite here. But Catherine Curry, she is persistent, and she's a great move here.
Well, I thought she was going to go straight back into the group. I was almost counting her down to go back into that group, but she's Yodo off the front. Back under 5 seconds again on this really fast downhill section. Curry there, just look at the focus that you described earlier on and rise back out the saddle as this road kicks up. It's such an undulating sort of course. It rolls. It's very difficult to keep an even application of power. You're always going through the gears, aren't you? Keeping on top of the power is always a challenge on this course. That's why riders do so many recons. Catherine Curry, though, I think, I'm going to say it, I think she is finally about to be caught, but that was a really, really interesting move, taking the pressure off the other Americans in that group, notably Jackie Godby, Courtney Nelson and Kristen Kuczynski. There's our first view of the draft map. You can just see the riders right back in there. Where you want to be in terms of getting the draft benefit and therefore spending less energy is right in that red section there. And the further out to the right or the left you move, or off the back, that's when the draft benefit is far less. But Curry here has got to be really careful, because after doing an effort like that, 3-minute effort, she's in danger of getting dropped. So she needs to make sure she gets back in to the wheel of this group. And look at that, a really well-timed use of an aero power-up just to help her latch back onto this group.
Wow, a perfect timing there of that power up to make sure that she doesn't get dropped. She was almost going out of the draft zone when you saw it on that heat map, and it was that danger move. And as you mentioned before, Matt, on this undulating course and especially through this section in Central Park, it's really difficult to get yourself into the rhythm. But again, the riders from the USA have been so audacious. They've been attacking Jackie Godby, the next rider to make a move, a rider who we know very, very well, and counter-attacking the move from Catherine Curry. USA sending another rider up the road and trying to break the rest of the riders in the peloton.
Well, that was brought back very, very quickly. Ashley Mulby-Passio not too far to the front. Linda Klein from the Netherlands, also in the orange jersey of the team from the Netherlands, brings back the American. But the Americans clearly, I think, are riding to a definitive preordained plan here, trying to make this as hard as possible. There they all are, just to the back. 5 riders as we look at the picture-in-picture of Jackie Godby. A very short-lived attack, but a telling one, I think. Only 13.4 kilometers to go now. One more ascent of that brutal climb. And there's another attack off the front now. Who is this? This is Anna Svardrup. Stephanie Sidlick, another one of the Americans has gone. This is the 5th attack in about 6 kilometers. The Americans really trying to tear this race apart with some super, super aggressive riding. This is wonderful stuff. I certainly didn't expect this, but clearly buoyed by the fact they're riding on virtual home soil, the Americans are making this a very, very exciting race indeed.
Well, you look at this course and the main feature is that forward QOM. That is the big point in the course. That is the main part with the 1.4 kilometers, average gradient of 6.1%. But they're using and making the most of this section through Central Park, where it is difficult, where the gradient does change. It does continue to undulate, 3% at the moment. And Stephanie Sidlick doing a tremendous job. And take a look at that time gap. This is the biggest time gap we've seen all race, Matt, from any breakaway. She's almost reaching 10 seconds at the moment, and still no real move from the riders behind.
Oh, this is absolutely fascinating stuff. Look at the face there of Stephanie Sidlick there, rocking her shoulders back and forwards in game. Let's look at absolutely focused there with those sunglasses on, still just under 9 seconds on this little bit of a downhill section. And just look at the way that these power-ups held are spread. A couple of vans there, couple of 8 aeros and 22 featherweight power-ups. A couple of ride-ons being dropped here for Stephanie Sidlick. Now, if you are watching and you happen to have your Zwift companion app with you, please do open it up, search for your favourite riders or the riders that you're thinking are providing us with brilliant entertainment, and give them a ride-on. It's a way of showing your appreciation. It's a Linda Klein trying to get across the gap now. She's 7 seconds, just moved off the front of the peloton, knows the quality of Stephanie Sidlik, but that was another short-lived attack by the rider from the Netherlands, brought straight back to heel. Mary Wilkinson at the front there for Great Britain, not too far away. Zoe Langham as well, Monley Keller also in the mix as well. But this is a good move by Stephanie Sidlik. 7 seconds is her gap as we look at the picture there of Linda Klein there. Headband on, earphones on as well. Just grimacing a little bit there because this is going to really, I like to use the word bite now. We're well into the race. One of the longest races in esports, the World Championships. Remember the distance, 54.9 kilometers. That's a long, long day out. Brutally warm as well, very hilly. And this is a great ride by Sidlik. She's still clear. 9 seconds is her lead now.
Yeah, she continues to grow this lead. It ebbs and flows, loses a couple of seconds here and there, then she gains it back. And at the moment, Stephanie Sidlik able to maintain an even and equal power output at the moment. She only has herself to think about, and this is a brilliant plan from the team of USA to have the constant counterattacks on this final lap here with 11.3 kilometers to go. And you're sort of waiting for that moment. There's a few nations in this chasing group who have multiple cards to play, multiple riders sort of at their disposal to do the chasing at the moment. But you just saw the defending champion, Ashley Mulman-Pasio, who's the sole representation for South Africa, just on the front, starting to do some work, Matt.
Yeah, well, this is what this is all about. It's forcing the other favourites to chase. Because of the depth in strength and the numerical superiority of the American team, they can afford to put riders off the front and leave other riders to chase. And thank you very much for getting involved with those ride-ons. It's almost like a blizzard of ride-ons out there, a real indication of how supportive the community is. And thank you very much, wherever you are in the world, for tuning in today. This is the 2022 UCI Cycling Esports World Championships, the fight for the rainbow bands. We are in New York City and we have just over 10 kilometers to go now. We have one sole leader, but a gap is coming down. Stephanie Sidlik of the United States of America, riding on virtual home soil, is out in front. She's the 5th rider from the team of the United States to try and move off the front. And there's a reduced peloton behind, damaged, savaged in fact by the 2 ascents of the forward queen of the mountains. We've got one more ascent to come and we finish on top of the climb, and that is where the rainbow bands will be awarded. This is getting exciting now. Things, as we said before, are starting to get, Hannah, to coin the words of one of my favourite riders out there, Ella Harris, things are getting spicy.
They certainly are getting spicy and tasty, aren't they? And this is where now we see a move off the front. A couple of riders, Louise Huback, who has been very, very quiet so far, and Anna Svardstrom starting to go clear on this gradient, 8% as the road rises up through the lap arch. They start to make a little bit of a move, the sprint arch, apologies, and the move all back together with 9.9 kilometers.
Oh, absolutely fantastic. Look who's gone off the front. Catherine Curry again. She is like, well, she's an absolute monster. Straight off the front, only about 5 minutes rest. Well, the American team are providing us with some absolutely riveting, thrilling entertainment here at the 2022 UCI Cycling Esports World Championships. Look at the skyline in front. That's where we'll be heading very shortly. And Curry, for the second time in around 15 kilometers, catapults herself off the front of this group, again forcing the others to chase. And the theme here for me is that they're setting this up for Kristen Kulczynski. I don't want to put the curse of the commentator on it, but that's what it feels like to me. And again, Curry, so strong, so experienced, has now opened up a gap of 7.5 seconds.
They're wanting to try and take the sting out of their competitors' legs at the moment, force them to chase. It means that the riders from the United States of America can just sit in the wheels. They can benefit from the draft of the other nations, from their rivals, from the other riders within that group, and they can sit back and really play that tactic. And by counter-attacking immediately as soon as one of their teammates has been caught, it puts the pressure on the other riders in that group. So it also lends itself that once the rider's caught and another rider counterattacks, you always have that lull in action. You always have that lull in the chase, because a rider who's just done a lot of chasing doesn't want to continue and put out high numbers, high watts, high power to then bring back the likes of Catherine Curry.
Well, Curry's absolutely flying here, out of the saddle on this long drag, although it's flattened out now. This is one of the few dead straight sections that offers up a little bit of respite. You can just see fluctuating between -1, 0 and 1%. In full TT mode, kicking out just under 4.5 watts a kilo now. But more importantly, a lead is swelling. It has grown now to 14 seconds. That by far, Hannah, is the biggest gap anybody has managed to earn themselves so far in this race. 8.5 kilometers to go, and Curry is absolutely flying. And the big question is, who is going to organise a chase? But one thing we do know, if you do get it wrong on that final climb, you can lose heaps and heaps of time. But this is a quite magnificent performance and a magnificent team performance by the United States of America. Whatever happens, this is a real great example of how wonderful esports can be. 8.3 to go. Curry, 16 seconds now the lead.
A wonderful performance all round. And as I said before, any attack that any rider in this World Championship makes, it has to count. It can't just be an attack to throw away just because you sort of, you don't fully commit to it. And this is something that the United States of America have done with all 6 of their attacks. They've attacked and they've made it count. It's done damage one way or another. And at the moment, that gap, that lead, it continues to grow. Catherine Curry continues to build on her lead at the moment, almost touching 16 seconds here. And Melanie Maurer, the sole representation for Switzerland, up towards the front, doing a lot of chasing at the moment. But Jackie Godbey, she's never too far from the front either. No,
Jackie Godbey is... yeah, as I say, she's had her turn off the front there. We're looking at Stephanie Sidlick now, the teammate of the rider out in front, Catherine Curry. It's now steadying at just over 15 seconds. But just look at the differential. Look at how much effort it is taking Catherine Curry to maintain this speed. 5.2 watts a kilo it was there. It's dropping down a little bit because we're on this slight little downhill section. That's where you can just see things have equalised in terms of the power being put out by the group behind. Although saying that, they have really eased up here. 17 seconds, the lead has gone out a little bit on this downhill section. This is a quite remarkable performance by Catherine Curry, and she's a pretty decent time trialist as well. Very, very good all-rounder, but the United States of America, with 7.1 kilometers to go, have played an absolute blinder. We've still got to go through the final arch of the day. That comes at 44.6 Ks. There'll be one more power-up awarded there. Sorry, 52 Ks, should I say. Only comes with around 3 kilometers to go, but I do feel that everybody's going to keep hold of the featherweight power-up. You see 52 riders in field at the moment have the featherweight power-up. 4 aeros and 2 van drafts as we still look at Catherine Curry moving towards the finish. Her lead holding steady at 15.5 seconds. When is the move going to come from behind? So 6.6 Ks to go. We're coming into the closing kilometers of the 2022 edition of the UCI Cycling Esports World Championships. This is only the second time we've held this championships, and the defending champion, Ashley Moolman-Pasio of South Africa, is in the bunch, and the gap is starting to come down now. This is one of these little drags, a precursor almost before the main meal of the day. The bunch all spread across the road, 12 seconds, and the gap is coming down now. So 6.3. Yep, 6.3 kilometers to go. Curry out in front, having to put out 6 watts a kilo. Melanie Maurer, Anna Svartstrom, Alice Lethbridge also moving to the front there. Zoe Langham, Cecilia Hansen, all the pre-race favourites are starting to move to the front. But you get the sense, Hannah, that these riders are just waiting and waiting. This is this little kick up, and then it drops down again, and then it won't be very long before we commence the final climb to the line.
There certainly won't. And there's a few riders in here who have kept their powder dry. They've kept themselves so quiet and so under the radar. They've just been following the wheels, not making any effort towards the front, any moves and wasting any energy at the moment. The likes of Courtney Nelson, the rider from the USA, a rider who's really kept herself quiet and under the radar. Likewise with Zoe Langham, we've not seen a huge amount of the informed rider from Great Britain, the rider who is a medical student at Nottingham University. Also, there's a couple of others, Caroline Boer as well, the Danish rider too. So, it's going to be really, really interesting. There's going to be a few riders in here who have a lot left in the tank for that final ascent to the finish.
You've got around 28 riders in this group behind. Many of them, as you can see, holding on to the featherweight power-up. Ashley Moolman-Pasio, we're looking at the defending champion out of the saddle. And another one of these small rollers, one of these small little undulations that will really start to dig into the reserves of these riders. 6 seconds is the lead now for the American Catherine Curry, but the lead is coming down very, very quickly indeed on this. Another one of these interminable little drags on this circuit. Thank you so much, wherever you are in the world, for joining us today at the World Championships. It's been a magnificent race so far, and with just over 5Ks to go, we have one sole leader, but bearing down on her, moving at a pace, are the peloton. 3% gradient here. That is the map of the heat map of the draft. So the bunch behind aren't quite in that draft, but the gap now has come back only 4 seconds. It's a slender lead. I don't think it's going to be enough now.
I don't think so either. You just saw the pain on the face of Catherine Curry, closing their eyes. It's really starting to hurt and sting now at the moment for the former USA road race champion. And these riders that Catherine Curry is going by, these riders are lapped riders, so it just shows the sheer pace that this World Championship has been. 17 years ago, Catherine Curry first represented her nation in a World Championship, and she's back here. She's leading this UCI Cycling Esports World Championship, Matt.
She certainly is. So age certainly hasn't blunted her. In fact, she's so experienced, so powerful. She knows how to suffer, doesn't she? And if you're going to be good at esports, especially on a course like this, or any course, in fact, you've got to know how to suffer. And Catherine Curry is absolutely flying. It came back to 4 seconds, but she is not giving up. She's managed to find a little bit extra now. 6.5 seconds is the lead for the American. Courtney Nelson also just moving up to the front, perhaps offering up a little bit of blocking, getting in the way of the riders who are chasing. 3 riders from Sweden still in this front group, or the group just chasing Ali. The Hansen, Belforth and Sparpstrom are still there. And Curry, well, look at this for a fight back again. We wrote her off. 4 seconds was a lead. She's managed now to pull back another few seconds. 7 seconds now with 4.3 Ks to go.
Wow, this is incredible from Catherine Curry. Even when she knows she's about to be caught from the group, she can feel that chase on, and she can feel the chasing group behind breathing down her neck. She goes again. She doesn't give up easily, and this is Catherine Curry all over. It doesn't matter whether this race, whether it's a race that's going to end in a sprint, whether it's a hilltop finish. Catherine Curry always is there. She's in the mix, and she plays to her strengths, and she's out the saddle again, putting out that high power 5.5 watts per kilogram at the moment. Wow.
And unsurprisingly, just looking at her tally, she's got 638 ride-ons, by far the most superior of anybody, but she deserves it. I can tell you that, because she is putting on a show here and in the Big Apple in New York City. It's a beautiful day here. I don't know where you are in the world in terms of you watching, but a glorious blue sky day here in the battle for the rainbow bands. Curry still in front now. 8 seconds is her lead, but we're getting ever closer. The final climb of the day, the climb to the top of this brutal climb. 1.4 Ks, 6.1%. But that doesn't tell the real tale, because there are pictures of 17 and 16% on this climb. Goes up in stages, very, very difficult to pace it right. But the bunch aren't letting her go away again. They've pulled back another couple of seconds. 6.5 seconds now with 3.3 Ks to go. We'll be very soon, Hannah, on the climb.
Catherine Curry, she's persistent, she isn't giving up. There is a world title on offer at the top of this climb, and she knows how prestigious this race is. And at the moment, the way that the team of the USA have been riding has been impeccable. They haven't put a foot wrong so far, but here is the defending champion, Ashley Moolman-Pasio of South Africa. She's moving up on the left-hand side. She's got number 1 on her back, and just take a look at the focus on the face of Moolman-Pasio, the 36-year-old. And it looks like Catherine Curry, dare I say it, that gap is starting to come down, Matt.
It certainly is. Well, brave riding by Catherine Curry. I think she's going to be absorbed very, very quickly. There she is, top left of your screen. Ashley Moolman-Pasio looks like she's performing in front of a live studio audience. It's a packed house. Ashley Moolman-Pasio, that is for sure. She is still in there. Curry still just dangling off the front after that turn there. Adele Norman there of Canada still in the mix. Zoe Langham, very dangerous rider indeed for Great Britain, also in the mix. Alice Lethbridge is also there. Louise Huback, Spartstrom. It's a very, very strong group indeed, and it numbers around 28 riders, and still with 2.5 kilometers to go. That is the final arch to obtain a power-up, but I do feel that everybody's going to be holding on to their featherweight power-ups. There you go, 65 riders still holding their featherweight power-up, because that is what you're going to need on this climb. Remember, as we head into the last couple of kilometres of this race, if you deploy your featherweight power-up, it reduces your weight by 10% for 15 seconds. That is going to be absolutely crucial, as finally Catherine Curie is caught by the peloton and the Belgian Amelia van Hove attacks off the front. Two kilometres now to go in the 2022 UCI Cycling Esports World Championships in New York City, and it is all back together, and just moving through to the front is Ashleigh Moolman-Pasio of South Africa, wearing number 1. She is the defending champion, and it looks as if, Hannah, she's happy to take things up right from the base of this climb.
Yeah, she's comfortable to take this on from the front, from the bottom of the climb. She knows how much damage she did on the previous ascents of this climb, and how much damage she did to the other riders around her. So, and she knows that she has that type of effort in the legs, and physically she has, you know, that 2.5-3 minute all-out effort, and she knows she's quite capable. She's confident in herself. I think she gained and grew in confidence in the last couple of weeks after her victory on the hilltop finish in round 6 of the Zwift Racing League, and I think, you know, the confidence, you know, sort of, and the pressure was off her shoulders, knowing what she was able to achieve and the form that she was in coming into this UCI Esports Cycling World Championships.
Well, the defending champion moves to the front on the first key part of this climb. It's only a short, steep section, but it's enough to make a bit of a difference. And Ashleigh Moolman-Pasio, that was a brutal surge by the South African wearing number 1, 10 watts a kilo. And with that move, she's already opened up a gap. She's doing exactly what she did last time up the road. Kicks up again here. Gets very steep, 12, 13% before flattening out. It's a complex, difficult climb, but the defending champion, Ashleigh Moolman-Pasio of South Africa, is now clear with a gap of 2 seconds. Cecilia Hansen trying to get across the gap. Jackie Godby not too far away as well.
The road ever so slightly just tails off here. She can get again a little bit more speed here, as the gradient is just at 0%, 1% here before it's going to kick up and ramp up ever so harshly. Now take a look at that. The red numbers, 14%, 15%. Ashleigh Moolman-Pasio, she's out of the saddle, and here is Loes Aragis, the rider from the Netherlands, who's got onto the back wheel of Ashleigh Moolman-Pasio. Cecilia Hansen as well, the bronze medalist from the inaugural UCI Cycling Esports World Championships. The Swedish rider has got on terms with Ashleigh Moolman-Pasio with 800 metres to go.
800 metres to go now, and the road is 8% as we move skyward in New York City here. The rainbow bands will be decided in 700 metres time. Can place Ashleigh Moolman-Pasio just drops a power up on the steeper section. Look at that, 17%. That's where it makes most of a difference. She's opened up a little bit of a lead, but Hansen is fighting here as well to get back in contact. Zoe Langham isn't too far away. This is where the road just flattens again. 600 metres ago, you can cut the atmosphere here with a knife. Absolutely brutal. Pasio looks still very, very strong indeed. Aragis not too far away. Langham is in 4th, and then there's a big gap to the next rider on the road. It looks as if the medals are going to be fought out between these 4 riders here.
A very, very wise move here from Cecilia Hansen and Zoe Langham. Also Loes Aragis. They're just forcing Ashleigh Moolman-Pasio to do the work. They're not coming by her. They're making sure that they can make use of that draft effect as they go through 400 metres to go. There's going to be another little kick up with around 150 metres to go, and that is going to be the sting. We've got 3 riders who are all almost shoulder to shoulder. Cecilia Hansen just coming alongside Ashleigh Moolman-Pasio, but waiting to pounce. Loes Aragis in the orange jersey for the Netherlands, Matt. 12% here with 150 metres to go.
Aragis goes on the front there, just deploying the featherweight power. 100 metres to go now. Zoe Langham also there too, but it's going to be Loes Aragis, I think, is going to take this one. She surges clear. What a brutal turn of pace by the rider from the Netherlands, and with it she takes the title. Loes Aragis is the 2022 UCI Cycling Esports World Champion, destroying the field with a surge in the last 50 metres. She will be wearing the rainbow bands. What an absolutely remarkable performance by the woman from the Netherlands. And look at the delight, the exhaustion writ large upon her face. Emotional scenes, but what a win.
Incredible. Lois Arreguis, she waited, she was patient, she just followed those wheels into the final few hundred meters. She had to do a big effort to get across and bridge that gap to Cecilia Hansen and Ashley Moolman-Pasio, but in the end, Lois Arreguis, she has a tremendous sprint on her, and wow, she'll wear those rainbow bands for the next 12 months. And you can just see the emotion on her face as well, and for those around her already starting to celebrate.
Absolutely magnificent stuff, straight on the phone there, as you would expect, texting all and sundry. Well, she played a very, very smart race. She didn't get tangled up in any of the shenanigans earlier on. We'll get the results up as quickly as we can for you, but no doubt about the new world champion of esports. It is Lois Arreguis. She's had a remarkable season, or last couple of seasons, has really come to the fore in the last 12 months. Very, very talented all-rounder, but she played a cool head there. She used the power up just at the right time, and when she let rip, there was nothing anybody could do about it. It was quite a definitive attack in the end, wasn't it?
It was, and it was a clear winner there. She certainly had a lot of daylight to the rider in second place, Cecilia Hansen, and when she made her move, it was with a vengeance. As you said, she didn't get caught up in all of the chasing from the breakaways.
She certainly didn't. Well, there is confirmation. Your new world champion, Lois Arreguis of the Netherlands. Cecilia Hansen takes the silver medal for Sweden, and then rounding out the podium, Zoe Langham of Great Britain gets the bronze medal. Defending champion Ashley Moolman-Pasio has to settle this year for 4th place. Liz Van Hooling, the first home of the Americans, in 5th. Mary Wilkinson there in 6th for Great Britain. Emma Belforth in 7th for Sweden. Courtney Nelson and Jackie Godby, 2 more American riders there in 8th and 9th. And rounding out the top 10 at 17 distant seconds, Caroline Boe of Denmark. Well, there we go. What a wonderful race that was. A slow burner, but an absolutely spectacular race it was in the end. And it's going to change the career of Lois Arreguis, because from now on, in the virtual world, she'll be wearing those rainbow bands, and she'll get a real jersey as well. Let's have, I believe we might be we're just going to have a quick look at the last 500 metres of the race, and hopefully soon, we're going to actually speak to Lois Arreguis. So let's hear what she's got to say. So, Lois, first and foremost, congratulations, you are the world champion.
Yeah, it sounds a bit unreal. I dreamed about this race 3 nights ago, and I dreamed I got beaten on the line. So it's better than a dream coming true.
I mean, it was a very, very interesting race, quite a tactical one. Did you? But you clearly played it very, very cool. You didn't get involved in any of the attacks, and your use of the power-up just at the right point on the steepest part towards the end. You must be really, really happy with the way that you tactically rode as well as physically.
Yeah, I knew I had to save the feather for the last part if I wanted to win the sprint. And I saw Moolman-Pasio using it on the part before. And yeah, I knew my chances were getting better there. It was hard to hang on that part, but I just thought I have to save the feather for the last part.
Well, Lois, enjoy your moment. Enjoy the next 12 months in the rainbow bands, and you can relax now, but well done again.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, we're just going to go straight to the men's race, because the men's race is coming up very, very shortly indeed. And there is the picture-in-picture. There is the New York course. So hello and welcome to the men's elite race of the UCI 2022 Cycling Esports World Championships. And of course takes place in New York, over 2.5 laps of the NYC Knickerbocker course, featuring this beautiful undulating terrain of Central Park. And there's a look at this brutal, challenging sawtooth profile where the rainbow bands will be fought for. 3 ascents of the forward KOM, 1.4 Ks long at an average grade of 6.1%. Now this is the main part of the course. That's the start. kicks up at the bottom at 16%, eases a little bit, and goes up to maximum 17% on the second part of the climb. It gradually levels out again just before the finishing line approaches, flattens out for the last 100 meters, but there's the last maximum gradient of 16%. There is the finishing arch high above in the skyline in New York City. Now we've got 3 power-ups available. The first sprint arch offers up the draft boost, which will be for every single rider, increasing the draft benefits for 30 seconds. Next up, and through the finish line, the riders will receive the aero boost, improving their aerodynamics for 15 seconds. And then the final one, which is through the lap arch. There's 2 occasions to get this one. It's the feather, which reduces the rider's weight by 10% for 15 seconds. And here we go, 54.9 kilometers long, looping round Central Park with a rather whopping 944 meters of elevation before we'll know who is going to pull on the virtual rainbow bands. Now, 23 federations and countries being represented, including Great Britain, USA, Belgium, Australia, and of course the nation of the defending champion Jason Osborne of Germany. A few of the key riders, obviously Jason Osborne, he's wearing number 1. There we go, also an Olympic silver medalist in rowing. Ollie Jones as well from New Zealand. Watch out for James Barnes of South Africa. He has been prolific this year. Freddie Ovett, back from the road. Numerous winners in the past. Lionel Vuillant, the Belgian favourite, winner of his qualifier too. Pim van Diemen, we want to watch, as will Zach Nair of America, and Tom Thrall, very, very explosive rider indeed. Well, the riders are off. I'll introduce you again. Hannah, a wonderful women's race, but this men's race should be nothing short of spectacular as well. A tough course out there. One of the longest races we'll see on Esports. As we look at Jason Osborne, I mean, let's talk about Jason first up. An Olympic silver medalist in Tokyo for rowing, burst onto the scene of Esports in 2020, and he's the defending champion. What are your thoughts on his ambitions and ability to win again?
Well, you know, he's a very, very strong rider. I saw him out yesterday doing his final recon of the course here in New York. And yeah, I think he's got a very, very strong chance. As you mentioned before, he's an Olympic silver medalist in rowing. Just to give you some indication of his talent, he actually was a stagiaire with De Koning Quickstep last year, so the team of Mark Cavendish, you know, they sort of spotted his talents, spotted how good he could be in World Tour Pro racing, and the 27-year-old from Mainz in Germany, yeah, he comes here with a strong team around him, but also a really strong chance of defending those rainbow jersey.
Indeed, well, he's a very, very talented rider, or athlete indeed. We've got an early attacker here from Japan. This is Ryosuke Honda, who has just moved off the front. Surprising early attack, still a long way to go, but why not try? You just never, ever know. It might provide the stimulus, provide the catalyst for other riders to try and jump across the gap. Bringing out just under 6 watts a kilo, 93 RPM. Pretty elevated heart rate there of 180, but an interesting early move from the Japanese rider. And the Japanese team have got a very, very strong lineup. Hodori Sasauchi, Tomoaki Takasugi, Tokada Ikeda, who I think will be their team captain, but an interesting move by the man out in front now.
Yeah, I think Honda, and I think for some riders early on in a race, they just want to be able to stretch their legs, they just want to have just to raise the heart rate just a little bit, just to get themselves into the race and get themselves into that mindset. They'll have been on the start line for quite a bit of time, waiting, and perhaps sort of that pressure, the excitement all starting to build up, and Honda of Japan just wanting to stretch the legs just to try something. I don't think it's an all-out 100% effort at the moment. However, he's giving something a go, and there's no chase from the riders behind at the moment.
Yeah, he's just got a couple of seconds lead. He doesn't look too distressed, does he? It looks like he's running pretty comfortably, but sitting on 6.3 watts a kilo is, I can tell you, will be very, very painful indeed. Teppo Lorio, the rider from Finland, the only representative from Finland, very, very popular in the Zwift Racing League. Really entertaining rider, Lorio just rolling through. We have 86 riders in the men's field. And here they are. This is the main pack moving very, very quickly at the moment. They're actually travelling at just over 40 miles an hour, so 63 k's an hour for the field on this slight downhill section. And good to see some early ride-ons. Thank you very much again for joining us here at the 2022 UCI Cycling Esports World Championships, wherever you may be in the world. We've already had one rainbow jersey decided, and in the next hour or so, the next one will be decided too. Can anybody wrestle it from the shoulders of Jason Osborne? And a bit of a reminder as well, this is the World Championship, so it's all national teams. And Hannah, that makes for a very, very interesting tactical proposition. And I mean, again, looking back to the women's race, the USA really tried to do something special. It didn't quite come off. What are you expecting from the men's race? Are you expecting something similar?
Well, yeah, nevertheless, there's some nations who have really big squads in this World Championship. The men's team from USA has a very strong, in-depth squad. Belgium as well have some really strong powerhouses with the likes of Matthias de Roos, Lionel Villarsson, Fabien de Vola. It'd be interesting to see what they can do as a squad. But you can't even look past the team from Great Britain. Gavin Dempster, Ed Laverack. Ed Laverack, a real specialist when it comes to courses with climbs in it, especially with a hill climb finish. James Barnes from South Africa, a rider who's in fantastic form, but a rider who we haven't seen too much of over in the last few months, but has been sort of one of those early sort of fantastic riders in esports. Brad Gavarius of South Africa. It'd be really interesting to see how he goes in the race today.
Indeed. Well, Idanori Sosachi is still out in front. He's slowly built that lead. Thank goodness he's getting a few ride-ons from the community as well. 4 kilometers just over covered. The Japanese rider really pressing on with this move here. Clearly means that none of the Japanese riders need to do any chasing behind, but this is putting him under a little bit of pressure there. We had Honda off the front earlier on, and now Sosachi has tried to go clear. He just needs to make sure that he adds a little bit of power, just kicks a little bit so he doesn't get punted straight out of the back of the bunch, but it is all back together. Antoine van Nochman now on the front. Let's have a talk to one of the most popular riders in esports on the men's side of things, Lionel Vuillersan of Belgium. He won his Continental Qualifier, much to his delight, as you would expect. But we had a chat with him earlier in the week, and he spoke about how he felt coming into the race itself, following on from what has been, for him, a frustrating Zwift Racing League season. He missed out on travelling to team camp because of isolation. So let's have a little listen to what Lionel Vuillersan has to say.
Yeah, so in order to get ready for the big day, for the World Championship, of course there was zero, but not only a lot of specific work on the trainer, with 100% train difficulty on the New York KOM because it's pretty specific. A lot of work outside too, VO2 max, and yeah, I missed my training camp because of quarantine, but yeah, for the rest, the legs are there, so it's perfect.
Great to hear from Lionel Vuillersan. I'm not too sure if we will see his mascot. Many of you who know Lionel will know about his mascot. Those of you who don't and wondering what I'm talking about, he has a duck called Gilbert, because he's a big fan of Philippe Gilbert. I'm wondering if the duck will make an appearance today. Maybe not, but there we go. But Lionel Vuillersan, an exceptionally gifted rider, certainly will like this course. Just sat at the back of the group there. And from a tactical perspective, in these early stages, that's one of the best places to sit, isn't it? When the bunch is moving along steady, we don't expect any big attacks from anybody early on just yet, but sat midway, well, in the middle of the pack towards the back, gives you the optimum draft benefit. Therefore, you're spending a little bit less energy than the riders at the front.
Absolutely, absolutely. And Vuillersan, one of the most experienced esports riders in this men's field here today, and he knows that when we saw that heat map in the women's race of where the optimum place to be within the peloton to make sure that you get the best use of the draft, Vuillersan, he's got it down to a T here. And for me, Vuillersan, he might not have had the season he wanted in the Zwift Racing League, but this is very, very different. He really excels in one-day races where it's a scratch race. There's no intermediate points, there's no intermediate sections. to have to gain points at for Vyaztin, quite like the UCI Continental qualifiers for the European continent. He really excels in this one-day race, and he can really deal with the pressure of the occasion. And you know, he's been putting a lot of effort, time into this UCI Esports World Championships.
He certainly has indeed. We're looking at the moment at Ed Laverack from Great Britain. Very, very talented hill climber. And as we're coming up to the course, how about we have a little bit of a conversation with Ed, who speaks about his specific preparation and his focus ahead of this race in particular, the importance of things like getting nutrition right, and also what the repeated effort required is for the climb, which ultimately I think will catch up with the riders. So here's Ed Laverack from Great Britain.
My preparation has been, very event specific. I don't think it's very difficult to know, what you need to be up there, fighting for the win. Lots of those short, hard efforts, short recovery, a good peak power, making sure you're well fueled, because the race is a little bit longer than most Zwift races, 45 minutes. This one's going to be, just over an hour. So I know it doesn't seem like a lot time-wise, but you're making 3 maximal efforts in that time as well. So if we call that 9 minutes of effort over an hour and 15 minutes of racing, and those 9 minutes being really hard, it'll soon catch up with us.
It certainly will. Ed Laverack as well, if you want to know a little bit more about him, he's a big Star Wars fan as well. So I'm wondering if he'll be going into hyperspace next time up the climb. So the first arch that we're going through at the moment, this will give our first power up. It's the draft power up. This is at 7.3 Ks or just over. It's the first of 7 opportunities to pick up the power-ups. And interestingly, we'll be on the climb very, very shortly indeed. Great to see the amount of ride-ons that are being given from you out in the community. Does make a difference. Great to see all of these national jerseys as well. I mean, both of us, Hannah, have commentated regularly on the Zwift Racing League, but it's a unique proposition, isn't it, to talk about the same riders but in different jerseys, all proudly representing their countries and national federations. As we have a quick look at the power-ups, we've got the draft power-up there, increasing your draft effect by 50% for 30 seconds. The aero power-up, which makes you more aero for 15 seconds, effectively reducing your CDA, your drag coefficient, by 25%. And then the feather power-up, which there's 2 occasions on course to grab hold of that one, which reduces your weight by 10% for 15 seconds. And we've got an attack off the front with the Americans. Brian Hodges, now on the lower slopes of this climb, has gone clear, kicking out 11.5 watts a kilo. That is a lot of power as we enter on to the lower slopes of this climb. Good move by Hodges.
Yeah, brilliant move there from Hodges, and a move which was with great intent. You just saw his watts per kilogram touching 12 watts per kilogram there for Hodges, and wanting to go on the lower slopes of the climb to really start to do some damage. Again, out of the saddle there, and immediately has gained just less than, coming up to 5 seconds over Henrik and Jay Vine at the moment here on this first ascent of the climb.
The American there looking very, very good. 6 watts a kilo, has got into his rhythm there, not too far away there in second position, riding for Australia, Jay Vine. Another great story behind Jay Vine. He's a very, very, he's a very lovely young man, but won the Zwift Academy a couple of years ago and now rides as a professional for the Alpecin Phoenix team, the same team as Mathieu van der Poel, one of the real, global sports stars. But Jay Vine himself has equipped himself exceptionally well after winning the Zwift Academy in 2020 and had a great 2021 season, and it was such a good season he's been signed on for another couple of years. He is a big talent and is sat there in 3rd place, but this is a good move by Hodges, though. His lead's coming down. Look at that straight pass. It is Rick Ottomer and Jay Vine setting the tempo at the front, and 10% gradient here. Lots of riders using their power up, unsurprisingly, and the draft benefit will help a little bit, but not so much on 10% gradient, but you might as well use it rather than not. I mean, it's important, Hannah, isn't it, to point out the way you use these power-ups. It doesn't have to be offensively, it can be in effect, to just reduce your effort, as you see James Barnes move to the front of a few of the big hitters, just bobbing and weaving at the front of the bunch here.
It's really interesting, isn't it, to see that the riders, the pre-race favourites, I would say, are sort of making those moves early on in the race. James Barnes, Jay Vine, all up towards the front line of Yasin too. But I think as soon as you start to see a big move like Brian Hodges did, you know, all the riders, they can't rest on their laurels. They have to be attentive to what's going on. And so all those riders who want to go home tonight with the rainbow jersey and take the victory, they know, well, this is my opportunity. I need to move up towards the front now. I need to be attentive to any moves that start to go. And here, one of the optimum places to be able to use that draft boost on one of the slightly lesser harsher gradients on this climb, as it reaches 3% at the moment, so a flurry of draft power-ups here, increasing that draft you're experiencing by 50% for 30 seconds. So it really does make all the difference, and then it starts to kick up and ramp up here with around 150 meters to go until we reach that arch. And you can just see this is the first glimpse that these riders will have at what the run into the finish line will be.
Yeah, just many of these riders, well, all of them would have done multiple recons of this course, prepared themselves as best they can just to get the feel of it. It's not a simple hilltop finish, this one, because of the way it ebbs and flows. Gary Muller, the South African, just on the front there. You've really got to get your pacing right. It's not as simple as one flat-out constant effort, because you've really got to lay the power on and continue to lay the power on once the gradient starts to lessen. And it's very steep with about 150 meters to go. Then it flattens out to just 1% as they cross the line. So it really is a complex finish to try and get right as we head down the descent for the very first time. And we should see momentarily a few riders adopting that super tuck and affording themselves just that little bit of respite for a handful of seconds, which on a course this long and a race so long is very important. Ed Laverick was talking about it earlier on. This is the longest race in esports that we've had all season. The World Championships always just that little bit longer, very much like it is on the road. The road World Championships generally is a very long, well over 250 Ks. So we've got the virtual equivalent, and it is a really different tactical play than the racing that we see in the ZRL. And I think it actually opens it up to more of the riders coming across on the road, doesn't it? So it's a really interesting intersection between the real Zwift specialists, the esports specialists, and the road riders, and that's what makes this such a fascinating proposition.
It does, and you know, the likes of Jay Vine, although you know he won his professional contract on Zwift through the Zwift Academy, spent the year last year with Alpecin Fenix, had tremendous results at La Vuelta a España. You know, he's come off a big racing block at the moment and has been able to come into this World Championships with some harsh racing and quick racing in the legs already and under the belt. And you know, he's, as I mentioned before, in the women's race, his wife was racing. They've both adapted to this race. They've moved, they live in Andorra, which is at altitude. They've rented an Airbnb at sea level down in Girona. So, you know, for these riders, as you say, even Rick Ottomer, you know, a rider who races on the road too, yeah, it's, for these riders, it does lend itself to those riders being able to come into the race because of the length of this UCI Esports World Championship.
Yeah, I think because it's slightly less explosive. Generally, a lot of the Zwift Racing League races, they're a lot shorter, 45 minutes, well, reasonably shorter, should I say, and they have intermediate sprints. So there's lots of explosive efforts that riders have to go through. This is a very different proposition. Although the same effects, the same gamification in terms of the power-ups, the aero, the draft, and the feather, the same drafting, and the same tactics in many ways. It's just more of a constant build-up, very much like, as I say, I use the comparison to the World Championships. It is the fight for the rainbow bands, so there are these comparisons, but ultimately, esports is very different indeed, and these riders would have ridden this course multiple times just to get the feel of these climbs, the ebb and flow of the course, but primarily that finishing hill is what you need to get right, because you can be on a great day, but if you get your timing wrong, your strategy wrong, power up deployment wrong, you're not going to win the rainbow bands. Everything's got to align, hasn't it?
Absolutely, and it depends as well how the race unfolds around you. Which riders form a breakaway, how many riders are in that breakaway, which nations are in that breakaway. Do you have to do a lot of chasing? You might have come into this and said, well, I'm not going to chase, I'm going to risk it all. I'm going to wait until that finish line and hope that by the time we get to the finish, there's not going to be a breakaway. I don't want to waste the energy in myself sort of doing all the chasing. But there's so many different types of riders within this group. You look at the likes of Liam Battazzo, the Italian rider, Team Pursuit world champion, with the likes of Filippo Ganna, Jonathan Milan. He comes into this race a rider who can deal with the demands of the racing. Certainly, he's completed the Giro d'Italia twice. He has the endurance in the legs, but it all comes down also to that gamification part of the Esports World Championships. How many recons has he done of the course, knowing where to use those power-ups, really knowing where to sort of lay down the power too.
Indeed, there's so much to it. It's really nuanced, complex, and that's what makes it such a thrilling opposition. And the fact that all these riders in different time zones from all over the world can ride together effectively as one. Now, one rider who has dominated the Zwift Racing League, leading in to the second edition of the UCI Esports Cycling World Championships, is the man on your screen from South Africa, James Barnes. He rides out of New Zealand, although he is a South African, and has won 5 rounds over the last couple of seasons of the Zwift Racing League. He spoke to us earlier in the week, spoke about racing with his teammates in the Zwift Racing League, and also about his aspirations for the World Championships. Let's hear what James had to say.
I'm not really racing against my ZRL teammates. I'm racing against my great friends. And it's think of it this way: whoever gets to the finish first will be buying everybody coffee, and whoever will be getting to the finish last will be buying everybody maybe a beer or two. Looking forward to lining up with the guys that I raced with the ZRL and the other teammates. It's going to be a great day. It's going to be an honor with all of us representing our countries, but it's also going to be an honor racing with them.
Great to hear from James Barnes. Again, a really, really likeable chap, but interestingly as well, the next esports team for which he rides, there are 9 riders from that squad. Obviously himself, Zach Neer of the USA, Brian Duffy Jr., John Bruin and Patrick Walls, all riding for the USA, Tom Thrall from Canada, James himself, Mark Bruce from Great Britain, Nicky Hogg of Switzerland, and Richie Barry of Ireland. So the next esports team, the dominant men's team this season, have got very, very strong representation across the board, and therefore lots of options. But they'll be riding against each other. So from teammates, although they are mates, it's going to be completely different here, isn't it? I mean, different set of objectives.
Yeah, very, very different proposition for all of these riders. Usually they're all on the same team, wanting to have the same outcome, and although they are friends, I'm sure they all want to have those rainbow bands. They all want to have those rainbow bands on their shoulders and take the victory. And it's just very, very different when you are racing against your teammates from your trade team, and then you go into your federation teams to represent your nation. The outcome, and the way that you race and the tactic is all very, very different.
It certainly is. Well, this is a Teppo Laureo. Looking very easy, isn't he?
Very comfortable.
Very comfortable. One of the finest haircuts in the world, representing Finland there. Looks pretty relaxed here. Very, very aggressive rider. Will like a course like this, but just sat in the middle of that group. 4.9 watts a kilo as the road just kicks up, forcing him briefly out of the saddle. He's the only rider from Finland. Again, very aggressive, just drifts off to the front there. Teppo Laureo, 5 watts a kilo, just opening his legs up a little bit there. Eddie Houle not too far behind. Again, good to see the ride-ons being dropped there. Let's have a look at the power-ups that are being held. 65 riders holding the aero power-up, and just 2 riders using the van draft. So early stages of this race, only 15.8 kilometers done and dusted, 22 minutes of racing. We should be racing for around an hour and a quarter, hour and 10 minutes. So still a lot to happen here as we look at another South African, Brad Guveris, inside his pain cave. I mean, the ideal setup, Hannah, we've talked We talked about the other elements of esports, the gamification, the use of power-ups, the fact that you can sit in the draft and save energy behind another rider. But one crucial thing is your setup at home, isn't it? What important key things will a rider have? I mean, everybody's different, of course, depending on what's available. But what are the key things that the riders will have at home?
Absolutely. I mean, for me, the key thing that a rider would need is good ventilation, getting a good breeze through the windows, but also making sure that you've got good fans, strong fans that can make sure that you keep your core body temperature as cool as possible, because the demands of esports are so difficult and so hard on your body that making sure that you keep your core body temperature as low as possible, making sure that it doesn't affect your performance overall, and that is one of the key things. You'll see riders with a fan in front of them, behind them perhaps, taking on wet towels, some ice towels too that have been on the freezer, but also making sure that you've got enough hydration to hand, and also things like gels, isotonic gels, caffeine gels towards the back end of the race. So I think, for me, they are the key things that riders will need.
No, definitely. Ventilation and keeping your core body temperature absolutely crucial. All of these riders are used to that though, but there's some quite nice idiosyncratic elements as well. People some riders are coming in the bathroom, in the kitchen, in the garage, and then there's little mementos close to hand, winners' jerseys, etc. I really do like to get an insight into the setups that these riders have, but as you say, crucially, it's getting that ventilation and the fluids on board, especially when we're moving to over an hour of racing. And that's when you really need to get your hydration strategy absolutely spot on. Even in a shorter race, you need to get it right, but more so for well over an hour of racing. It is a completely different kettle of fish as we look again at Brad Guveris, another really fast section of the course. Speed topping out now at around 60 kilometers an hour. This really is a course of contrast. I think it's a great setting, Hannah, for the World Championships. The inaugural UCI Cycling Esports World Championships took place in Watopia, and here we are in New York. But I think it's got a little bit of everything here. I think it's a deserving location, a deserving course to get a true world champion from.
Absolutely, and on this course there's a number of opportunities to attack and make the race selective too. There's a little bit for everyone. There's great opportunities whether you want to try and make your move like Brian Hodges did on the climb, whether you want to go through Central Park, and I just think the way that the race can unfold, and there's so many things on offer, but also those power-ups, those 7 chances to gain a power-up, and every rider knows that every rider will get the same power-up through each arch. So with 100% certainty, you know exactly what other riders are going to get, unless they've used their power-ups that have been in their bank.
Well, here we go. One of the most aggressive riders out there, Teppo Loro. We said he was aggressive, the only rider representing Finland, and he has gone clear now. So good move here by Teppo Loro. This is typical Loro move, isn't it? Although he's been brought to heel very, very quickly indeed. Nobody's going to let Teppo Loro go clear, that is for sure. Jason Osborne, the first time we've seen Osborne, he's not too far away. Ollie Jones as well there, another former winner of the Zwift Academy representing New Zealand. So Jones also there in the mix, still all together. That was an interesting little move, but another one now, Rick Ottomer of the Netherlands going clear. So this is really quite interesting, riders just getting a sense, or maybe just trying to open their legs and seeing how they feel, or maybe trying to just to start something off to see what happens.
And almost sort of just using that free speed, as we said before, that they started to gain a little bit of speed. They just want to try something, carry that speed through, and in doing so, other riders behind having to put out those big power numbers just to make sure, because if you see a rider who is a little bit of a danger move, Teppo Loro being one of those who you always know he's very aggressive, he's very attentive up towards the front. You never want to let one of those strong riders out of your sight.
No, definitely not. Very, very dangerous indeed. So people marking each other. There is Jason Osborne, the world champion. Really burst onto the scene. He was a rider we didn't know too much about, but he's an absolute beast on a bike. Here's the rider from Germany. It's just his general athletic abilities. Clearly got a quite incredible physiology, quite versatile engine on board. Comes from rowing. and then burst onto the scene to win that title. And the things we haven't seen him race on Esports, we know he's been riding on Zwift pretty regularly in training, but we haven't seen him in the ZRL, so we don't really know what his form's like. But I know, as the defending champion, he wouldn't enter this if he wasn't going to give it a really good go. So he remains at one moment a bit of an unknown quantity, but we do know if he's on it, he could win this again.
But his
difficult one, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah, I completely agree, Matt. And his physical attributes as a rower really complement this type of racing here on Esports, sort of the physical demands that are needed. And as you say, he's not going to come in here to defend his title if he isn't in good form and in good shape. As you see, James Harvey, a slight moment off the front here for the rider from New Zealand. And here, Takasugi chases this one down, the rider from Japan. Rick Ottomer has been so active and attentive here in the early parts of this race.
He has, the rider from the Netherlands just off the front there. Tomoaki Takasugi of Japan. They've already put 2 riders up the road very, very early on in this race, in the form of Honda and Sasauchi. But Ottomer, an exceptionally good rider, is now moving clear and is opening up a bit of a gap. This looks like a proper effort hill, though it's come back again. This is very, very interesting. Harvey of New Zealand brings him back. Jordan Jaeger also there from the United States of America. Alban Puig of France also in the mix there, and it all comes back together. It doesn't appear that anybody wants to let anybody go here. This is, I wouldn't call it nervous, but everybody is pretty attentive as we look for the first time at Freddie Ovett of Australia. Born in Scotland, in fact, but Freddie Ovett, very, very seasoned campaigner, although again, one of the key riders, one of the out-and-out favourites, we haven't seen him in the Zwift Racing League. Applies his trade professionally for the Legion of Los Angeles, spent a lot of time, of course, in LA. I've seen him on Instagram, he's clearly looking good, he's been doing a lot of sprint training, but again, a little bit unknown in terms of his form on this platform.
For some riders, and it's quite like the inaugural Esports World Championships, where you didn't know how some of these riders were going to perform, and they've been quietly chipping away at the hard work being done, sort of keeping themselves under the radar. And I think Freddie Ovett being one of them. He was one of the most dominant riders in the Zwift Racing League in previous editions. But for Freddie Ovett, not been racing in season 1 or season 2 of the Zwift Racing League, but still been hard at work, quietly chipping away.
He certainly has, as is this man. This is the second attack from the rider from the Netherlands, Rick Ottomer. But it's easing up. It's just interesting what he's doing here. Just under 300 watts there, which equates to just over 3-4 watts a kilo. So drifting back. Really unusual little manoeuvres here from Rick Ottomer. Perhaps feeling just that little bit frisky. But sitting on the front in the wind, to me, I'll be honest with you, Hannah, a little bit puzzling. A rider of his class, you'd have thought would have just be a little bit more patient, just drift back. Or perhaps he's just feeling extremely good because Lois Adahis just won the World Championships only half an hour ago. Perhaps he's just a little bit excited.
Absolutely running on a high. But yeah, as you say, Rick Ottomer, he's such an experienced esports rider. He's such an experienced rider in World Tour Pro racing. He comes from Groningen, turned pro back in 2012, 10 years as a pro, and you'd think that he would know that he's just wasting energy here by dangling himself out front. Get yourself back into the peloton, because it wasn't really an attack that was going to count or amount to anything.
No, it certainly wasn't. A bit of a strange one, but there we go. They've gone through the arch, again, the lap arch for the very first time, and that lap arch for everybody has given them the featherweight power-up. And the next time they'll get that will be in about 22 k's climb. That comes at 44.6 k's. It's the penultimate power-up distribution as well. So they've all got a featherweight power-up, unless some of them haven't used the ones from before. That reduces their weight by 10% for 15 seconds. And Ottomer, again, is off the front here. It's a really interesting tactics from the rider from the Netherlands, although Tomoaki Takasugi of Japan has gone straight over the top. So the Japanese riders are really, really keen to really set things in motion today. And I don't think these are particularly necessarily fruitless attacks, but you just never know. It might just coalesce into something meaningful. So why not have a go? Especially if you think your chances are limited on the final climb, why not try and instigate a breakaway? You just never know, because what's the point, Hannah, in riding anonymously? If you know that you're you're limited in terms of attributes towards the back end of the race. Why not have a go earlier on? And it's really, really good to see.
Yeah, quite. If you're a rider and you know that you don't have that real explosiveness for the final climb and the final ascent, and you're not going to be able to climb with those riders who are the best in the world at that sort of 2.5, 3 minute VO2 max effort, go long, try something, and hopefully you can get a couple of riders with you. You can work well together. Rick Ottomer, for all that we've been almost criticising him, he's got himself. This is the move, and this is what he was sort of waiting for. He was trying to suss out which rider might want to come with him. Is anyone going to look out and think, well, perhaps I want to try and make a move here? But Rick Ottomer, he's got himself in contact with Takasuki of Japan, and working well together, sharing that workload very well together. 8 seconds is the gap now.
Yeah, 8 seconds, the biggest gap anybody has managed to open up so far. So Tomoaki Takasugi, it's worth mentioning, he's riding in Japan, and it's 5:20 in the morning, so they've been up all night. So a real stark illustration of the different time zones and the different preparation that these riders have. But all of the Japanese riders, there's some really solid riders that ride regularly in the ZRL at this same sort of times. They've clearly got used to it because they've had some really, really good performance. And I tell you what, he's riding very, very strongly at the moment. And this is a formidable duo out in front. The lead up now to just over 9 seconds. So it's just coming true, isn't it? If you don't ever try, you will never know. And this is the World Championships, the biggest stage for esports. Why not get your name out there and give it a go?
Absolutely, absolutely. And this is where your form, you'll be in peak form. All these riders will be on top of their game here, and want to try and play to their strengths. And as you say, what a huge opportunity, a proud, prestigious moment for these riders to represent their country in a World Championship. High stakes World Champion jersey is on offer, and a world title gold medal. But Rick Ottomer and Takasuki, they are sharing this workload very, very well. And you just mentioned there, it's 5:20 in the morning for Takasuki over in Japan. Rick Ottomer, very different though, 9:20. So in terms of their fueling strategy, it's going to be very, very different for these two riders.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think another rider's just moving off the front. This is Kjell Power just moving off the front, just to try and the rider from Belgium just drifted off the front and brought back pretty quickly though, but the lead's holding steady now at 9 seconds. Takasugi and Ottomer relaying very, very well indeed, and when you can just see the difference in terms of effort when a rider goes to the front, they put out a little bit more power. It's not so much on these little downhill sections, but when on the flat or the gentle rises, there's a big, big difference when you're riding on the front as opposed to sitting on the wheel of the rider in front of you. And that's reflected in the power output. So keep an eye on the power output, which fluctuates depending on where these riders are in the bunch. The best place to sit midway through the peloton in terms of getting the draft benefit is in the middle, just towards the back, but right in the center, and that is where you'll essentially get the most draft benefit. But the lead is now coming down. It was around 9 seconds, it's now been cut in half, and it's Matteo Cigala, another very aggressive rider from Italy, who's moving to the front. So it does look as if the tenure of the two riders out in front, Hannah, is going to be short-lived. Although saying that, it's now gone back out again, so it's yo-yoing, and Ottomer just detached Takasuki now.
Yeah, Ottomer just using the gradient on the road just to inject a little bit more pace, to gain a little bit more time over that chasing group led by Noah Ramsey of Canada. And Takasuki, for all of his efforts, he's just unable to match and go with the move of Rick Ottomer of the Netherlands in his orange jersey. Ottomer, he's been attentive, he's been aggressive from the very start of this race, but it looks like he'll come to heel very, very shortly.
That's quite interesting. This isn't anywhere near the main climb, but riders are already using their featherweight power-ups, and I think it's important that we do use the women's race as a comparison in relation to the deployment of power-ups, and you would think there would be a similarity, but a lot of riders using it there, but quite clearly a lot of riders holding on to the featherweight power-ups to use them for the climb, because the next one that they go through will actually be the draft one, and that isn't ideal for a climb. And most riders in the women's race did hold on to it, so it's worth just reiterating the fact that if you hold on to a power up and don't deploy it, and you pass through another arch, you hold on to the one that you haven't used. That's just clarifying that point. So Ottomer about to be rejoined, or retaken, should I say. So into the maelstrom once more, back into the centre of this virtual bunch on this little 5% drag in the heart of New York City, this wonderfully green, verdant park. And shortly we'll be heading back up into the skyline again to commence the second ascent of the forward KOM, where I think we'll see a few more splits. A few of the big riders may move to the front, but very much like we saw in the women's race, there's a real settling in process. Nobody taking too many chances here. We've had a couple of little interesting attacks, but at the moment, most of the big players, again, I'm going to wheel out another commentator's cliche, keeping their powder dry.
I think it's really important as a rider, you know, you've got ambitions of taking the victory. You don't want to make silly attacks, silly moves, waste any energy. You want to save as much as possible, and you want to, as much as you want to try and make a move, or you feel really good because you've got fantastic form, it's the World Championships, you have to be patient. You really have to rein yourself in and not get too excited by the occasion. Of course, the pressure's there, maybe the pressure that you put on yourself, the pressure around you, and of course those riders who know that they can do well and be victorious on this course, but sort of being patient when you're seeing moves go up the road is very difficult to do.
Yeah, we're around half distance now, and you are totally right, Hannah. We're looking at Albin Puig of France. 3 riders from France represented in this World Championships: Hugo Viot, Adrien Voulier, and Albin Puig, who's been taken back in by the peloton. A little bit of a glance across there, a nice little headband there. God, it's got the look of a Bernardino circa 1984 there, if you ask me. But Albin Puig back in the safety of the peloton as an Italian wheels to the front. Matteo Cigala and Jaden Jager there. Lionel Vujasan not too far away. And may I remind you, if you are already riding on the Zwift platform and you have the Zwift companion app, please do get involved and give these riders a ride on. It does make a lot of difference. It's nice to see that involvement from everybody watching here. Thank you very much indeed, wherever in the world you may be. Thanks for tuning in. It's been a wonderful World Championship so far. We've got one more rainbow jersey to give out, and it's on this course, the Knickerbocker course in New York City. We're looking now at Richard Barry, one of 2 Irish riders in the field, and Barry has just clipped off the front there. Well, no, he hasn't. He's back in the bunch, should I say. But Richard Barry has a very, I mean, Barry's a solid rider, but I think Chris McGlinchey of the Irish team would be their protected rider, you would imagine. We were going to see Nico Roach, but unfortunately Nico Roach has become poorly, so couldn't actually ride. Big shame. But Chris McGlinchey, you'd imagine, on his day, could win this one. He really, if he gets it right, he has the physiology to win this.
Absolutely. He's a huge prospect for the Irish team here at the UCI Cycling Esports World Championships, especially with his attributes, his physical attributes as a rider. This course, you have to think, suit him down to the ground, really. You know, he's able to put out that high power. He's also not afraid to go with those moves, and you know, we've seen him previously in the Zwift Racing League that he's able to sort of hold on to the high power, the high numbers for a long time, an extensive time, and especially with that hilltop finish, McGlinchey, you know, I think he'll be the protected rider, shall we say, for the Irish team.
Has won races in the previous editions of the Zwift Racing League and the Zwift Classics that we've had in the past, so he is a rider that has performed at the very highest level in esports. We're just looking at Aaron, one of the members of the South African team. 3 riders from South Africa: Bradley Guveris, Gary Muller and Aaron Borrell, as they continue to roll towards the climb for the second time. Just going to go through another arch in a second. This is where they'll get the draft one, but I have a feeling when they roll through here, and we'll see very shortly, that most riders, I'd certainly be one, I need all the help I can get on this climb, I can tell you that, won't be deploying. I've seen hardly any draft power-ups being used from that previous one, or the featherweight power-up being used at all. So I think most riders will be using that featherweight power-up to either put a bit of a dig in, maybe trying to move clear, or more importantly on lap 2 with one more ascent of this climb to come, just to save a little bit of energy on the steeper slopes.
It's incredibly important, as we've seen on that first ascent. The riders who were struggling to stay with the pace, once they've reached the really grippy, hard gradients of the climb when it really starts to bite the legs, around 12%, 13%, upwards of 16, 17%, and they're the really difficult parts of the course and of that climb. And I think important, you've just seen one rider using the featherweight power up. In my opinion, a little bit early where the gradient isn't anything too fierce.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if you use the power up at the right time on the steeper section, that's where you're going to get the most benefit, because you get that, the slower you go, if you lighten the load a little bit, that's going to give you more benefit. It's not depends on the gradient, but the steeper the gradient, that's when you really want to deploy it, and that's when we see the real esports experts deploying the power-ups at the best time. You see it time and time again, and that's become even more finessed over the last couple of years as this sport has evolved. It took a number of riders, everybody really a little bit of time to get used to, but now it is something that's so important in your armoury. It's not just about reconning these courses, knowing every inch, every centimetre of these courses and being physiologically right. The level is now so high, you have to make sure you get the power-ups dialed, because they quite often, more often than not now, are the difference between winning and losing. It's such an important part of e-racing, esports.
It certainly is. It's a critical part of the process and of the racing. And I think, in the earlier days, it did take a little bit of trial and error from the riders to really learn where was the critical point and where was the perfect point to be able to use a power up depending on the different courses here. But I think that combination between reconning a course like this World Championship and learning exactly where you want to use those power ups is critical.
It certainly is. We're over this early first steep section. You can just see there, flatten out, top right of your screen, that is the gradient. Just watch that turn red very, very rapidly indeed. There we go, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15%, up to 16. And there, just on this steeper section, is where we see several, or more than several, power-ups being deployed. We're looking at Torben Partridge Madsen of Australia out of the saddle. Look at his face there, 8-9 watts a kilo for the Australian. Jay Vine has now moved to the front as well. Jay Vine, in fact, is moving clear. So Jay Vine certainly knows how to ride on this platform exceptionally well. The Zwift Academy winner now plies his trade for Alpecin Phoenix, flying the flag for Australia in these World Championships. Similar thing last time up, the first time up the climb, Jay Vine was one of the riders handed right at the forefront, but Jay Vine clearly wants to try and make this race as hard as possible, but nobody is willing to follow the young Australian right now.
Absolutely not, and he's just doing this to try and string things out a little bit. And there is already a few riders who, from the sheer pace and power from Jay Vine, who have already started to feel the damage. Paul Odlin, Fabio Costa, Chris Yip, all starting to feel the sheer pace of Jay Vine. And you can just see his wife on the left-hand side of his picture-in-picture, Brie Vine, just giving him that little bit of encouragement at the moment. Looking very relaxed and composed here, though.
He's looking remarkably relaxed and composed. I tell you what, if I wouldn't look like that if I was kicking out 9 watts a kilo. I don't think I'd be able to kick out 9 watts a kilo anymore. But there we go. Jay Vine, a very popular figure there. And now it's the turn of a couple of Canadians to hit the front. Noah Ramsey and Leandre Bouchard are the riders near the front. This is our second glimpse of the finish line. The next time up this climb, they'll be battling for the rainbow bands. 16%. And then it flattens out. Really, really complicated climb in terms of getting the power down just at the right time in combination with deployment of the featherweight power up, which I think most of the riders will save for this point. 3%, 2%. And here we go, just as we cross the line, just there, 1%. So a real tapering off of the gradient over the top of this climb as we get our first glimpse of picture-in-picture of the aforementioned Irishman, Chris McGlinchey, who knows how to win at this elite level. And he's looking good there, but it's starting to just fragment a little bit near the front, and certainly going to be a few riders in difficulty.
There is, although, despite the efforts there on the climb from Jay Vine and the active start that we've had from our breakaways, there's still a large group here, still in contention for this World Championship jersey. 63 riders still in contention at the moment. Rick Ottomer just a couple of seconds off the back, trying to get himself back into this group. So still a large group of riders.
Certainly is a lot of riders in this group. Most of the pre-race favourites. You can just see Jason Osborne, the defending champion, has been very quiet, drifted near to the front a few times. Gavin Debster The British rider just moving up the outside. Ed Laverick still there at the back, who we heard from earlier on. Chigala, Oftedal, Harvard Gledners, very quiet indeed, making sure it doesn't burn any excess energy at all, because in a race of this length, I mean, it's hard enough expending energy in a 45-minute esports event, but here you really do. Against this sort of level, this is the pinnacle, this is the World Championships. You cannot give any quarter. You can be the strongest rider in the race, but if you just get it wrong and show your hand too early, it's not going to pan out. What you need, as well as all the other attributes we're talking about, the one thing we haven't touched on is patience. I mean, when we saw that Lewis Adegase, how patient was she in the women's race? It's all about patience and remaining calm under a lot of pressure.
Absolutely, and being smart as well. Really being calculative of where you make your efforts, where you make your moves, which moves you might want to follow, and being audacious that if there is a move a breakaway going up the road, that you are patient, that you are willing to risk it in order to win. And I think for a World Championship, that's very, very difficult to do. But I think that's certainly something that Loes Adegase did in the women's race. Even when we had all of those breakaways from the riders from the USA, they were looking very, very dangerous. Loes Adegase, she waited, and she was very, very patient.
Just looking at the picture-in-picture there of Zach Nair, 25 years of age, actually won his Pan America's Continental Qualifier, and we did have a word with him earlier in the week, and he speaks about the confidence boost that he took from winning that Pan America's Continental Qualifier. Here's Zach Nair of the United States of America with a very fetching headband on.
Yeah, winning the Pan American Qualifier was a huge confidence boost for me. I had looked at the World's course before the qualifier race, and I thought I had a decent shot at maybe the sprint, but it wasn't something I was counting on. So to win that was almost a surprise to me, and that gave me a huge confidence boost in training and in racing in the last couple months, and especially alongside my teammates that are also here at Worlds. It's been really unreal. It's been really cool.
Well, great to hear from one of the Americans. 9 strong. They have a very, very strong team indeed. 10 riders in the women's race, 9 riders here. Kevin Bouchard-Hall, Spencer Segerbrook, Patrick Wall, Zach Nair, we just heard from Brian Hodges, Brian Duffy Jr., Jaden Jager, Ryan Larson and John Bruin. They are all of the riders from the United States of America, the biggest team actually out of all of the field. You have to look then to Belgium with 6, New Zealand, Great Britain, Japan, Canada all have 5. So by far the biggest team in terms of depth and strength. And there's a few riders from that squad that you would not be surprised if they ended up in the rainbow bands of world champion.
Absolutely not. And I think, there's several nations where they do have multiple cards to play in this World Championship, and we're just starting to see Rick Ottomer, I think, is currently chasing. So after all of his efforts that he did in that trying to get away and break away from the group, he's now chasing on his own at the moment, 19 seconds in arrears.
Oh, this is a big solo effort from Rick Ottomer, and just shows there's nothing wrong with being aggressive, but it comes at a cost. It's great to see him up the road. He is a very, very gifted rider indeed, but perhaps just dug a little bit too deep into his reserves and was distanced on the climb. There's another attack off the front. It's Andy Nichols just attacking there for the rider from Great Britain, kicking out 9 watts a kilo, and he's drawn the sting from a few other riders. Noah Ramsey, Jan Emmerichs and Martin Martins, the 2 German riders, and a Canadian trying to bridge across the gap to the British rider, who, quite interestingly, I'm wondering if he hails from Yorkshire, because he's wearing a cap in the World Championships. Absolutely unprecedented sartorial scenes here in New York City.
Yeah, it's wonderful to see. It's something that you certainly couldn't do in World Tour Pro Racing IRL. But Andy Nichols, opting for that flat cap. But a great move here from Nichols. There's a few riders who are trying to jump across at the moment. Nichols persistent with his pace at the moment, 6 watts per kilogram. And Michał Kaminski, the Polish rider, has started to up the pace, inject a little bit of power, and the junction is going to be made by Oftedal of Norway, and it's all back together once again as the red numbers in the top right hand of your screen start to go up 10% the gradient here on this part of the course.
Well, there's so many little kickers you forget about on this course. It's one of my favourite worlds to ride in, but you do forget how attritional this course is as we look for the very first time at Jason Osborne. That's a rather luscious hair of his, luxuriant hair, should I call it. He's got a full-on crowd there, but he is the world champion. Remember, he's also an Olympic silver medalist, no less. He is a phenomenal talent. And as Hannah said at the top of the show, was a stagiaire for the De Koning Quick-Step World Tour team the back end of last year. He's got some good teammates, Martin Martens, Christoph Thiem, Jan Emmerichs and Jonas Rapp. But Osborne on the front of the group with some attacks now. We're looking at that picture of Osborne, but there's a couple of attacks. Segerbrook has gone clear with Martin Martens and trying to bridge across the gap as well for Norway, Henrik Fjellheim.
Well, this is a really dangerous move here. Spencer Segerbrook, an experienced rider in esports at the moment, and with 3 different nations at the moment, all working very, very well together. Martin Martens uses his Aero Boost power up here with 16.7 kilometers remaining, just over 10 miles in. Depending on where you come from, but Martins, the teammate of Jason Osborne at the moment, pushing on hard at the front.
Well, this is great for Jason Osborne and the rest of the German team, and of course for the very, very large American team. This is a good little move now. They've managed to, there's one rider also trying to get across the gap, I think has just joined, that's Leandre Bouchard, so he's now there. We've got Rainer Keplinger, also from Austria, should I say, trying to get across the gap. 5 seconds, 5.5 seconds for this good little group. Segerbrook of the United States of America, Bouchard of Canada, Martens of Germany, Fjellheim of Norway, and Joe Pirot of Belgium. Also there, well, that's a very, very strong group indeed as Fjellheim deploys an aero power-up. We're looking at picture-in-picture of Martin Martens there on the left-hand side. But this is a good little move. 5 seconds for the 6 riders out in front.
And all 5 riders working very, very well together. Joe Pirot uses his Aero Boost power-up as well here. Straight off the bat, just making things a little bit easier for himself, but just drawing out, gaining a little bit more speed into this another little kicker in Central Park. And at the moment, the time gap continues to rise. Noah Ramsey at the head of the chase, 7.5 seconds. Sam Hill, the Australian rider, also up there, and Nicky Hoog, the sole representation from Switzerland too, and James Barnes within the top 10.
Well, this is a very interesting group. When you look at the composition of this group, the Belgians have got a strong team, 6 riders strong. The Americans are represented. They've got 8 riders sat further back. Norway, Norway only have a team of 4, but one of them's in the front groups. That leaves only a certain amount of riders to start chasing. So we're going to have to look for teams like Great Britain who've missed it. Maybe the Netherlands, they've also missed it. Because of the amount of nations represented, 6 nations, all with big teams, can now just sit back. That is very interesting. As a result, the gap now, for the first time, double digits, 12 seconds for our leading 6 riders. This is very, very interesting indeed, and under 15 Ks to go now. And this is the 2nd edition of the UCI Cycling Esports World Championships. Wonderful stuff here. 11.5 seconds is their lead.
And the defending world champion Jason Osborne, you just saw him up there doing the chasing and just being up towards the front for Germany, just patrolling things up towards the front. Chris McGlinchey, the rider from Ireland, also up there, and Pim van Diemen, the rider from the Netherlands, wanting to try and inject a little bit of pace. 10 seconds, it comes down ever so slightly here.
This is another one of these nasty little kickers here in Central Park. Constant undulations make for a real complex course. There's little moments of rest and then real moments of having to put a lot of power down. It's hard to get into a smooth, even rhythm. It's a real staccato style, is this particular circuit, and that's why I think it's such a good proposition. It's a complex effort as we look at one of the fans of Henrik Fjellheim taking a picture. I'm not too sure how welcome that was straight in his face, but look at the focus on the lad's face there. It looks as if the Norwegian team are all riding together in a venue, which is really wonderful. Another real indication of how far esports have moved in the last few years. Wonderful to see the team of Norway riding together as a collective. 12 seconds is still the lead, so this is very, very effective. Teppo Lorio moves to the front. So what teams do you think need to start talking to each other? Australia, they need to maybe get in the mix. South Africa, not represented out in front. Great Britain, as I said before, New Zealand, also some of the bigger teams with no representation need to start trying to do something. This is very interesting. 13 seconds for our 6 riders out in front.
Also, New Zealand, might want to start to put some riders up towards the front to help and assist with the chase. They've got some fantastic riders who are well capable of taking this world title. Ollie Jones being one of those who took second on the full stage of the Tour of New Zealand, which was a hilltop finish. So you look at how the course is here in New York on the Knickerbocker, and you'd think, well, it would suit Ollie Jones. So the nations really need to start to get themselves organised, get riders up there represented, and start to begin that chase, because the gap, it continues to rise 14 seconds and it's holding.
It is. Well, one rider has been stuck on the front from the chase group. Number 7, look at Sam Hill, the Australian, has been sat on the front for the last couple of kilometres and hasn't relinquished at all. He is clearly putting in a big effort. Look at his watts per kilo compared to the riders behind. 6 watts a kilo compared to Jaeger. 4, 3, 1 just behind. So Sam Hill is clearly being instructed to try and limit the losses or try and bring this back. The Australians not represented out in front. The Australian squad, Aidan Sinclair, Jay Vine, who was aggressive earlier on, Ben Hill, Freddie Ovett, Torben Partridge Masden, and Sam Hill, who is still there in position number 7, trying to bring this gap back. Well, there he is. He was just drifting off the front there, but 15 seconds now for our 6 riders out in front. That is a very impressive lead, and they continue to work very effectively together.
And despite the work done there on the front from Sam Hill, the 26-year-old from Australia, the time, it hasn't started to come down at all, despite his efforts and injecting a little bit of pace. And I think the thing is, he's not got any help from any other nation at the moment. It's solely left to Australia to do all the work here at the front. South Africa there with Eddie Hull starting to get themselves involved, but who's just thrown themselves over the top? Gary Muller, the rider from South Africa.
Yeah, Gary Muller just punts himself through, travelling around 40 k's an hour now, moved through to the front. A power-up's just been used there by Nicky Hug on the left-hand side. So the gap continues to go out. 14 seconds it is, 13 seconds now. So a little bit more pressure is being applied on the front. The rider moving through to the head of the pack now for Australia, Torben Partridge Masden. He's the rider that's just drifted off the front. I don't think that's in an effort to attack. I think he moved through to the front to try and drag the rest of the pack with him, but the gap continues to go up. 16 seconds it is as Jay Vine now moves to the front, but we do know how much riders can lose on this climb. We know how difficult it is when you've been riding hard on the flat on the approach to this climb, but at the moment that's dangerous. 17 seconds, that's the biggest it's been all race.
Yeah, huge gap here for the this leading group of 6. And the thing is, for the leading group of 6, of course, the group is smaller. There's less opportunity to draft from those riders around you. You're having to put out much higher watts, much higher power, a lot of more pressure than you have as if you were sort of sitting back in the peloton, sort of surfing the wheels in that chasing group behind. And we know as soon as you get to those sort of climbing, where you get to the ascent and get to the climb towards the finish, the gap can drop substantially.
It can indeed. We've got about 3 kilometres till we get through the feather arch, and that I think will be the last power that riders hold on to the finish. We've got one more arch, that comes at 52 k's. That's where they pick up the draft, but as we've seen before, I think riders are going to almost ignore the draft one and hold on to that feather power up. So absolutely fascinating stuff. 16 seconds now for our leaders. America are represented with Spencer Segerbrook. Joe Perrot is there of Belgium. Martin Martins of Germany also in the mix there. Leandre Bouchard of Canada is also in this front group of 6. Rainer Keplinger of Austria is there. And then rounding out the 6 men out in front, coming into the back end of the 2022 UCI Cycling Esports World Championships is Joe Perrot. So a wonderful group out in front, working really well together. Just look how tightly packed they are, Hannah, making sure they're getting the benefit of the draft. And I wouldn't imagine any of these riders are actually in direct communication. This is where the skill of esports really comes into play. Managing your effort, making sure you're doing your turn on the front, and then making sure that you're keeping it tight and getting the benefit of that draft behind as we move through our penultimate archway, which will give the riders the feather power up, which I do feel they're going to hold on to for dear life until the final climb.
Absolutely, and it just shows this formation here for this leading group of 6, how experienced they all are. are, the formation that they're showing at the moment between the 6 of them, just making sure that they're getting the best and using the best of the situation in terms of the draft effect of all the riders around them. Rainer Keplinger looking very, very good.
He's looking really smooth, isn't he? Keplinger there, just riding at 5 watts a kilo. Looking very, very steady indeed. Nice and smooth there, keeping himself pretty cool. In the second position now, moving to the front is Martin Martins. So that's Martins is in at the front now. Absolutely fascinating stuff here. Fjellheim, Segerbrook, Bouchard, Keplinger, Pirot are the riders in front. 16 seconds, it's holding steady. Jason Osborne, the defending world champion, now moves to the front for Germany. But remember, he has a rider in front, so he's not going to want to chase Martin Martins. It means that Osborne can just rest up and leave it to the other favourites in this race. It is holding steady. The status quo for the last 5 or 6 Ks, Hannah, has remained the same. Still 16 to 17 seconds.
And between the 2 riders from Australia, Partridge Madsen and Sam Hill, despite all the work that they're doing at the front to try and bring this gap down, they're not able to eat into the tremendous lead of this group of 6.
Oh no, well look at the, as we head towards the back end of this race, the NTT data, the power up sailed 1 Van Draft, 5 Aeros, and unsurprisingly 64 featherweights riders saving this to the end, but it is Sam Hill relaying on the front with his teammate Torben Partridge Madsen. They know that they've got to try and bring this back to try and mitigate the gap. They've got 2 very, very clear favourites in, well, 3 really, Ben Hill, Jay Vine and Freddie Ovett. Either one of those riders could realistically come away with either the rainbow band or a medal. That is why they're putting troops on the front to try and bring this back. So Sam Hill, look at the effort of Sam Hill there. Really driving hard. They've got to make sure they don't open up too much of a gap, but it's still holding steady. So it's essentially here 2 riders versus 6 out in front.
And the 6 riders so working well together, but I think, you know, the Australians Sam Hill and Partridge Madsen, they'll be wanting and hoping that another nation will come and give them some assistance. The likes of Great Britain, who have got a strong squad around them. Also South Africa, they've also got such strong riders, but I think some teams, perhaps they're just playing it an audacious move really, and playing it bold, that they're just hoping that it will come all back together come the climb, and they still have enough left in the tank to be able to go for the victory.
Well, one rider who's clearly a little bit impatient has no other teammates. Teppo Lorio of Finland now moves to the front. A big turn of speed by the rider from Finland in the blue there. And just relaying through here, Fabian Diovala, Gary Muller not too far behind as well. Sam Hill straight back to the front again. As soon as the pace dropped, Hill was back on the front, working tirelessly for his teammates. Nicky Hogue as well from Switzerland, never too far away as well, but it's still holding steady. 7.5 kilometres to go now on the 2022 UCI Cycling Esports World Championships here in the heart of New York City. And we finish up on the top of the brutal climb. Well, this is very, I think we'd see a move such as this. But these riders now are making it difficult for the riders behind this. I think you're quite right. There's definitely a little bit of brinkmanship here, and only one team willing to do the chasing, and that's Australia.
Yeah, they're the only team that are willing to commit to try and bring this gap down, and at the moment they're holding it steady. They're taking a second off here or there, but it's not the outcome that they want at the moment, with 6.8 kilometres to go. For all the effort and work that Partridge Madsen and Sam Hill have been doing, they would have wanted to have seen the gap come down a lot quicker than this, and at least be around that 9-10 second part. And Martin Martins and the team from Germany all have the setup with all the riders together. They've got fans around them too, and Martin Martins got great support from family and friends there. You can just see them in the background.
Yeah, just behind that barrel there, Martins looking across. He's in the breakaway. The defending world champion, Jason Osborne, a teammate of Martins, is safely in the pack behind. And the gap is starting to drop a little bit. From 17 seconds, it's dropped to 13 seconds. Osborne at or near the front at all times. Noah Ramsey, James Barnes, one of the pre-race favourites from South Africa, is also not too far away. Well, fascinating stuff here. This is that little kicker, the little precursor before that drop down. They'll then pass through the final power up option at the sprint arc that comes at 52 Ks. But believe you me, looking at the amount of power-ups held on the right-hand side there, powered by NTT, there are 67 riders holding on to that featherweight power-up, and that is no real surprise at all as Joe Perrott presses on at the front. And it's gone out again, 17 seconds now, so really interesting move. And this group, I do believe, well, that they do sense they've got a true real opportunity of pulling off a bit of a coup here.
Absolutely, and I'm wondering if there's a couple of riders, and you see Leandre Bouchard, the rider from Canada, just starting to be tailed off up that climb. He did use his featherweight power up there, which was very, very early. You would have thought that he'd want to keep it for that final climb, but I do think some of these riders, they're really starting to suffer now. The intensity is starting to set in for this leading group.
Well, this is Avenant, that's a rider in the green now. That is just been lapped. As we look at the stats of Joe Perrott, putting out 8 watts a kilo up this little drag. Perrott from Belgium has been the rider, quite clearly, who's done most of the work out in front with this group. Perrott, Bouchard, Keplinger, Martin, Segerbrook, all there in this front group. And Fjellheim as well of Norway. This is a very, very interesting composition. 17 seconds and holding, just over 5 kilometers to go, only a couple of Ks to the lower slopes of the climb, and then the climb begins proper with 1,400 meters to go. Can this group hold on? But what we do know is this, as well as the riders behind, this group has been working very, very well together, and it's going to be costing them a lot in kind of energy expenditure as well. So anything can still happen in here in New York as we head back to the chases, still being led by Australia. Sam Hill doing a lot of work, and Torben Partridge Masden working exceptionally hard too.
We're starting to see a few different nations start to come to the fore there. A couple of jerseys from Great Britain getting themselves involved up towards the front. They're not actually on the front helping and assisting Sam Hill or Partridge Madsen with the workload. Jason Osborne, he's ever present, just patrolling the front just to try and disrupt that chase for his teammate Martin Martins, who is in that breakaway. So Osborne playing that teammate role at the moment. Vyarsin starts to move himself up for Belgium too, so again another rider playing that teammate role. He's got a rider up front in Joe Perrott, but Vyarsin, he's just there ready to pounce if the opportunity occurs.
The two Australians, Hill and Partridge Madsen, have got a little bit of assistance from another Antipodean. Alex Heaney of New Zealand has now moved to the front to assist with the pacemaking. The shape of this peloton has changed. There's a little bit more urgency about them, and for the first time in a few Ks, the gap is starting to come down again. It's just over 14 seconds now. 6 riders out in front. Martins of Germany, Fjellheim of Norway, Spencer Segerbrook of the United States of America, Rainer Keplinger of Austria, Joe Perrott of Belgium. They are the riders out in front, and with them as well, Leandre Bouchard of Canada. And they have, with just 3.9 kilometers to go, a lead of 14 seconds over the main bunch. Just in the middle, there is the rider with number 1. That is Jason Osborne, the defending champion. What can Osborne do? He doesn't need to do much right now apart from just wait and be patient. He's got Martin Martins out in that front group, and he looks pretty comfy right now from what we can see here.
He looks very, very comfortable at the moment. Focused still, he's still attentive to what is going on around him and how the race is starting to unfold, but looking very comfortable and just waiting and being ready to pounce should that leading group get caught. But Jason Osborne looking strong.
Yeah, Osborne looking very good. Nicky Hug, Etienne Van Empel, Noah Ramsey, Vujasan as well there. They had the just riders rotating on the front of the bunch, and the gap is slowly starting to ebb away for our 6 riders out in front. Under 12 seconds now, 11.8. Vujasan moves to the front. Sam Hill still doing a lot of work for the Australian team as we look at the stats of Joe Perrott. The Belgian there, picture in picture, working really hard, rounding this corner. 2.9 Ks to go. Won't be long before we're on the lower slopes of the climb up to the skyline, where the rainbow stripes will be awarded. You can just see on the left-hand side of your screen, through these beautiful trees, the start of the road to the sky. And the gap has come down now to 10 seconds as the road just kicks up. We've got one more little section of downhill, and then it's uphill all the way to the line. So we're just coming through the final opportunity to gather a power-up. 52 Ks done now, and 2.5 kilometers to go. But I don't think the rods will be gathering this one. They'll be saving their featherweight power-ups for the climb. This little downhill section offers a tiny little bit of respite. The lead goes out again from 10 seconds to 11. But I think the gap, the damage, I think has been mitigated somewhat by the work that's been done on the front. It's going to be hard, I think, for these riders to stay clear, but boy, this is going to be some tussle on the final climb.
Yeah, it's difficult, isn't it? Because you're starting to see nations come towards the front of the chasing group who have riders in the leading group. So they're just disrupting the pace and all the work that's being done from Sam Hill and Torben Partridge Madsen. So once they come to the front, there's no other teams, there's no other nations coming to the front other than Australia, and Germany and Belgium doing a fantastic job of disrupting the chase at the moment. But straight from the bottom of the climb, as soon as they've turned left, Rainer Keplinger, the Austrian rider, and Henrik Fjellheim, the Norwegian, they go clear, they make a little bit of a move, open up a little bit of daylight, immediately closed by Martin Martins of Germany.
Well, look at the power they're having to put out. 7, 8, 9, 10 watts a kilo. Spencer Segerbrucker will be one of the heavier riders in that group. He's a powerfully built man, having to put out a little bit more power to stay with these lighter riders. Joe Pirot of Belgium has been very active in this front group, hits the front. Look at Keplinger, up to 11 watts a kilo. This is the first of these really steep sections here. It's only short, but an early deployment there from Keplinger of the featherweight power-up, reducing his weight by 10% for 15 seconds, and in the process opening up a gap, still 10 seconds and more to the group behind, and now being led by Lionel Viersan of Belgium.
Well, that deployment of the featherweight power-up from Rainer Keplinger of Austria, he has opened up a gap to his breakaway companions too. 3 seconds now to Martin Martins, the German rider, and Joe Pirot of Belgium. 10 seconds to Spencer Segerbrucker, and you just see as we crest that top, I think the junction has been made for some of the riders. Jay Vine 12 seconds behind now. Ben Hill and Ed Lavrat come into the top 10, and Lionel Viersan too of Belgium.
This is an amazing effort by the Austrian rider. He has 1 kilometre to go. This is the finale of the 2022 UCI Cycling Esports World Championships. The man on your screen is leading as the road gets steeper, as the road gets higher. Less than 800 metres to go to see who will find out who will win the rainbow bands. And this man has got a big, big lead. 7 seconds over one of the riders from the breakaway. What a ride this is by the Austrian. 6.5 watts a kilo. He still looks as cool as a cucumber. And has 11 seconds on some of the big hitters coming behind now. 700 metres to go.
Yeah, this 24-year-old from Austria is doing a tremendous job. He was part of that 6-rider breakaway, but you can just see how much this is hurting now as the gradients reach 15, 16, 17%, almost closing his eyes. But what has he got left? He still has 6 seconds for the lead as he reaches 600 metres to go. Jay Vine, the Australian rider, leads things at the front. Oscar Vid as well, the Danish rider, comes towards the front. And here comes the defending champion, Jason Osborne, in 4th place. 3 seconds now. It's going to be antagonisingly heartbreak, isn't it?
Well, Keplinger still flying up this climb. 400 metres to go. Look at the face of the man from Austria, but it looks like it's going to be cool. Osborne is absolutely flying. He's used the aero power-up on this flatter section to catapult him past the Austrian. Osborne, the defending champion of Germany, is in the lead. Ben Hill not too far behind, but look who's coming up. Ben Hill, Jay Vine also there. This is the last steep section of the climb. 150 metres to go. Jason Osborne churns his way up at the top of this climb. Just coming up, it's Rainer Keplinger is closing. Just coming through. This is Jay Vine. Jay Vine is coming through for Australia. Vine is there. Looks like Vine is going to take it on the line. Jay Vine is the world champion. Jay Vine, the winner of the Zwift Academy, takes the title, snatches it from Jason Osborne at the last. Jay Vine of Australia is the UCI Cycling Esports World Champion. Well,
wow.
What can you say about that?
I'm left speechless. Absolutely incredible there. I mean, it was looking like it was going to go to Rainer Keplinger, go his way after his efforts in that breakaway and up the climb. The Austrian rider, and then Jason Osborne with that terrific effort and terrific deployment of the aero power-up. But Jay Vine, and there we have it, Matt, confirmation.
Fantastic stuff. Jay Vine is the new world champion. There it is. Can he believe it, in front of his wife as well? Freddie Ovett makes it a 1-2 for the Aussies there in second place. Jason Osborne, the defending champion from Germany, will have to settle this year for the bronze medal. What a battle that was. Ben Hill in fourth there, making 3 Australians in the top 4. Great ride by Lana Vujasan of Belgium in fifth. Then we have Oscar Vid of Denmark. Rainer Keplinger with that brave ride for Austria in 7th. Thomas Thrall, the first home for Canada, in 8th. Nicky Hug there in 9th for Switzerland. And rounding out the top 10 for Norway, Harvard Glednes. What an amazing race that was. All came down to the last few hundred metres. I thought Jason Osborne had it, but Jay Vine came through at the last with a perfectly timed effort. We saw how confident he looked earlier on, but what an amazing race and what a wonderful advert for esports.
Brilliant, wasn't it? And it just shows the reason why the Australian team were working so hard at the front with Sam Hill and Torben Partridge Madsen, that they knew that they had such a strong lineup of Australian riders with Jay Vine, Freddie Ovett, Ben Hill, all of whom could have taken the world title today. And to have a nation with 3 riders in the top 4 is exceptional. But Jay Vine, he timed it to perfection, and he is the 2022 UCI Cycling Esports World Champion.
Well, talk us through. I'm breathless here, because this was an amazing attack here by Jason Osborne, deploying the aero power up 150 minutes ago. Tell us what happened.
Yeah, well, Jason Osborne, he caught Rainer Keplinger with 250 metres to go, and he had such a formidable lead with 100 metres to go, and we saw him picture in picture where he was participating in the race. He was pushing such a huge gear and just trying to get on top of that gear, but Jay Vine, he just came with that speed, using the draft off the back of Jason Osborne, and consequently Freddie Ovett also overtaking the defending world champion. But hats off to Jason Osborne, a terrific attempt at defending his world title. So close yet so far, but the Australian team, highly deserved. They fully committed to bringing back the 6-rider breakaway. It was looking touch and go as to whether it was going to all come back together, and they had a plan, they stuck to it, and it certainly paid off. Gold and silver.
Indeed, first, second and fourth for the Australians. I mean, you have to take your hat off, I think, to Rainer Keplinger as well, who kept the Austrian hopes alive for so long and then still ended up salvaging a 7th place. A fine ride by him. Such an interesting composition. And I do believe, well, we hopefully we'll be speaking to the race winner very, very shortly. But as a proposition, I mean, looking back over that race, it's a slow burn. We expected that, didn't we? Because so much was at stake, and it's not a course that you could use your energy too early on. But then that breakaway, it provided us with some real entertainment. But what about the Australian team? They got the first, second and fourth, but the work they did to try and nullify the damage potentially that could be caused by that breakaway swung the race in their favour ultimately when you look back.
It did, and if it wasn't for the Australian team doing the bulk of the work, I mean all of the work in that chasing peloton to bring the 6 riders back, I don't think the outcome would have been the same. And Australia, they fully committed with Sam Hill and Torben Partridge Madsen. Both riders were sharing that workload out towards the front. They had no help from any other nation at that point. They fully committed, and it certainly paid off. But I think it just shows when you come in with such a strong group of riders for a nation, and they all fully commit to that plan, just what can happen.
I mean, that race built to such an amazing crescendo, but what a performance it was by the Australian team. Well, this was the lowest slopes of the climb. This is Pirot. He's already been left behind, in fact, using that featherweight power up. Just a little bit further up the road was the rider who was the last remaining rider, Rainer Keplinger. That was an astonishing performance, and the power he was putting out and was able to sustain shows that he's a real rider to watch. Not a rider we know too much about, but clearly exceptionally gifted. And at this point, the gap was still at about 12 or 13 seconds, but look at the bunch here. This is where the real difference was made, and this is where the real esports aficionados, plus the riders with a lot of power under the hood, really started to open things up. This was all about timing, but this man out in front, you have to doff your cap to the Austrian, because that was nothing nothing short of sensational. But in the end, it wasn't to be. But we've seen some magnificent racing in the World Championships, this second edition of the World Championships, and in the Zwift Racing League. But that finale was an absolute humdinger, wasn't it? To coin our Dave Towler, our colleague over in America watching this, that was certainly on like Donkey Kong, wasn't it?
It certainly was. And yeah, you know, to coin Dave's phrase, it was. And Rainer Keplinger, he took that race on with around 1.8 kilometers to go. He made the move from the very lowest slopes of the climb. I don't know about your heart rate, Matt, but mine was certainly through the roof, watching what was unfolding before our eyes. And this move here, when Jason Osborne with 250 meters, caught and went past Rainer Keplinger from Austria, it was looking like his gap was unassailable. And coming up fast with around sort of 75 meters to go was Jay Vine. He didn't give up despite seeing such a huge gap in front of him. And I think once Jason Osborne got to the really steep gradients here with 100 meters to go, let's not forget it's 17% at this point. I think it just really took its toll on Jason Osborne.
Well, this is the moment where Jay Vine could sense victory, and then a few moments later, there it is. That's the moment that Jay Vine became World Cycling Esports Champion.
And what a moment that was, of fantastic racing in both the women's and the men's race there, and brilliant and very deserving champions at the end. Sherry, still with me here in the studio. Sherry, let's just say that final climb, it was kicked off by an Austrian and really finished off by the Australians.
Certainly was. I mean, I'm still breathless to think that I thought the Austrian was going to get that.
Yeah.
And the way the Aussies controlled that really put a man up there to bring that gap back down, and yeah.
We were discussing, weren't we? It was a bit touch and go with that six-man break, that they went at around about 15 kilometres left of the race, whether they would stay out. And it was teetering at around 12, 13 seconds, went out to 17. Then the bunch started to get themselves organised, but really, they did it all the way to the bottom of the climb, and that's what launched Keplinger up it.
Yeah, we did say that when we were watching, the break was going to stay, but the Aussies committed and put two riders up there, and they obviously had full faith in Jay Vine and Freddie Ovett as well, so that was great to see.
We can see here, though, just how well that six-man breakaway worked together. There wasn't really anybody surging off the front. They were all equally strong. Joe Perrott there highlighted, in particular, put in some big turns. Martin Martins as well. I mean, look at the numbers as well. You've got sort of 6 watts per kilo just to stay up the road. They're strong riders in that break.
It was, but I was keeping an eye on the numbers back in the peloton there, and you could see the organisation. The Aussies didn't get much help at all, and that's why they committed. And it was almost like watching a road race there, that final. It was just that commitment from the team, and the best man won.
It is funny. I mean, the chasing bunch, they could have been a bit smarter about it. We were talking that the Brits had strength in numbers there in particular. Ed Laverat, we know, is a great climber when he wants to be. So why didn't they go a bit sooner and perhaps tee him up for the final climb?
Maybe they were waiting, for that final punch, and another team took it up. So at the end of the day, it was GB's loss there. One rider in that could have helped, and then it would have been a different story.
It was GB's loss. Ultimately, it was Jason Osborne who lost the Rainbow Stripes jersey off his shoulders, but he really did fight right to the death.
He did, and just like we saw in the women's race as well, the past champions really stood up to a great race.
He was pedaling in squares there on that 17% gradient, and look, Jay Vine just came absolutely powering past, 10 watts a kilo there, followed by his Australian teammate. There you go, his partner watching as well. We think they're in Girona, which is probably where their training base is. And I don't think he was underwhelmed at the end, but I think he was probably just absolutely exhausted by the effort there.
Yes, I know, and you can see by the effort he's put in, it was a solid effort, But he's fresh off the road, so it just goes to show, you can combine both road and Zwift if you've got the metal to ride on.
You can if you've got the quality. But interesting, we were discussing whether the esports specialists at the end of their season are going to be better than the road riders who are perhaps just starting theirs. And in Jay Vine's case, he's shown that a little bit of road form is really helpful.
I think it does help, you know, and if you've got the knack for e-sport racing and you understand the game, as we said before, then using your strength from the road can only benefit.
And when Jay Vine does take to the Zwift platform again, this is what he'll look like. He has the rainbow stripes on his shoulders for the next year, sure to be mobbed with a ton of ride-ons the next time he's on Zwift. And of course, as we said, he will get the physical jersey as well to race in when he's back on his training setup, of course, back on his kicker there at his home. Let's talk about the women's race, because in some ways, more animated than the men's. And I think we can just look at the winning moment now. And again, on the final climb, massive effort from Lois Adderheest of the Netherlands. I mean, look at that. Absolutely exhausted. She said it was a dream come true, but she really earned it. And here's our virtual podium presentation now. Good efforts by Cecilia Hansen and Zoe Langham in second and third place. But again, Lois Adderheest, these are the rainbow bands she will get to wear for the next year, both in the game and also physically on her shoulders when she's back on her turbo trainer, powering away through the Zwift landscapes. Really well deserved. And again, it went quite down to the wire. And again, the defending champion, this time, Ashley Moolman-Pasio, not giving up until, well, not giving up at all, but just getting taken at the end.
No, I mean, Ashley had to ride the numbers, and it was a game she had to play. I think she raced extremely well, and she did the best she could against a strong American team.
She rode a really strong race, actually. There she is, surrounded by people supporting the reigning champion, at least at that point in time. Went very strong up the climb, 6 watts of kilo there. As you can see, Cecilia Hansen giving her a good run for her money, and Zoe Langham really hanging on. Lois Adderheest in 4th at this point in time with just 200 metres to go to the line, keeping her powder dry. And you could see Ashley Moolman-Pasio really not giving up at all, getting loads of encouragement there from her fans. Just wasn't to be. Just perhaps again went too soon, bit too much effort, just burnt all the matches. What do you think?
I think you nailed it all in one. You
Yeah.
know, Ashley raced as hard as she could, again, against the numbers. And she tried to split them on the penultimate lap. It didn't work. So all she could do was, you know, use her strength, her power and her qualities, as she knows in e-racing. And it didn't work this time, but an outgoing champion, and full credit to Ashley.
She's been a great champion, and it's been great, Sherry, to have you with us commentating and giving your points of view on this. It's been a fantastic evening here in the UK, wherever you are in the world, racing or watching. It's been absolutely fantastic to watch as well. Our congratulations to our 2 world champions. You'll see them on Zwift over the course of the next year with their rainbow bands on. But thanks very much indeed for watching. Bye-bye.